It starts by telling the story of a kid named King Shang who was always surrounded by people looking down on him. He never met his biological parents and was raised by Master Lin, the same guy who once suggested he marry his granddaughter to seal a deal. But things only got worse because Lin disrespected King so much that after the wedding, he treated him like nobody, never even talking to him. Soon after, Lin and his sister schemed against King, trying to make it look like he was a traitor and kicked him out of the house. On top of that, he got beaten up by some thugs hired by his wife. Just when he was about to give up on the miserable life he'd been living, a golden light suddenly flashed in his mind, turning into a massive dragon. King was stunned, scared of the voice that started calling him. The dragon appeared, disappointed that his son was living in such a mess. Then it took on a more human form and revealed that King was the only heir he could trust, the one who could carry on his legacy. The dragon passed on his power to King and gave him a lifeline, warning him not to disappoint him in the future. As soon as King received this surge of energy, he felt a new power flowing through him. He started to sense things he couldn't before. He heard some female voices he didn't recognize but couldn't make out what they were saying. Then a black-haired girl approached, telling him not to move too much because he was hurt. King sat up in bed, realizing he'd been given a secret superpower along with a bunch of medical knowledge. The girl went to tell someone that the doctor had arrived. When she turned back, she was shocked to see King completely unscathed, not a scratch on him. He introduced himself as King Shang and promised he'd repay the favor someday after having been saved from such a tough situation. The girl was still trying to figure out what had just happened, but she decided to let it go. She told him he didn't need to thank her because it was actually he who had saved her grandfather. She explained that her grandfather had been sick and wanted people to do good deeds in return. King stood up confidently, saying he knew a lot about medicine and wanted to take a look at her grandfather to see if he could help. The girl wasn't sure she believed him, but she led him to her grandfather. Dr. Sun and Mr. Su were there, saying they only needed some medicine and that the old man would be fine, but King interrupted, saying Dr. Sun was wrong. Mr. Su could get much worse very quickly. Dr. Lee looked at King angrily, saying he was a very famous doctor who shouldn't be contradicted. But the truth was, he was far from right. When Mr. Su started shaking violently, even scaring his granddaughter, Dr. Sun was completely stunned, not knowing what to do. The girl asked someone to call emergency services, but it was too late. While they waited, King approached the old man, holding his head and thinking of a possible solution. The girl said her family would pay anything if he could save her grandfather, but he didn't need to hear that. He was already acting, channeling his healing energy into the old man to stabilize him. Mr. Su twitched a little, but he quickly got much better, leaving Dr. Sun completely confused. King collapsed on the floor, exhausted. When Mr. Su thanked him and tried to reward him for his help, King said he was just paying off a debt. The girl daughter laughed softly and helped him up, explaining that she would do the same for anyone who needed it. Keeping it casual, she formally introduced herself as Suan and said she had memorized his name, which surprised King, but he just thanked her again. Then Suan led him a bit further to ask how many years her grandfather had left. A bit of an awkward question, but King listened and tried to reassure her, explaining that life itself would reveal what was meant to be, and it wasn't their time to worry yet. As dinner approached, the girl asked the kid to join them, but he declined, saying he was too dirty to accept. At that moment, a message from his wife Lin appeared on his phone. King saw how shameless she was, openly admitting she had planned to remove him from her life, but he decided that he would see her one last time and apologize to the others present, promising to return and help the old man. Suan ran up to him, offering to take him wherever he needed. They left together in a car while Mr. Su called one of his men to investigate King's life, making sure he wasn't plotting anything bad. King returned to the mansion, finding Lin furious for not having tracked him down earlier. Before he could respond, she didn't want to hear it and just demanded that he hurry to sign the divorce papers. After properly introducing him to her future husband, Mr. Yang Yang from the Shan Shui group. What a name, right? King made it clear he didn't care about being tricked, since he had never considered her a real wife anyway. Lin, as always, tried to argue it wasn't betrayal, saying he had been her servant for 3 long, miserable years. She insisted he should be grateful for serving her, but since he wasn't, King signed the papers reluctantly, sealing his fate and said goodbye to the LM family for good. King thought about what had just happened as the girl followed him, complaining about his bad manners. Then he suddenly heard Suan's voice, surprised that she hadn't left. He quickly apologized for making her wait, not realizing she had been waiting for him. Suan told him not to worry, but mentioned that her grandfather wanted to speak with him. Both the LM family and Yang were taken aback by Suan's beauty, as well as her confusion over why King was spending time with such a stunning girl. Meanwhile, one of Mr. Su's men was explaining King's story, relief that he had no worrying criminal record, but still curious about how he had healed Mr. Su just by placing his hands on him. King, who Suan had arranged a place for, said he would step aside before meeting his grandfather again. Suan understood immediately and withdrew, reminding him that she could still ask for anything she wanted. Once alone, King locked the door and collapsed on the floor, realizing he had acted too fast in healing Mr. Su and now had no way to explain it. There was no turning back. He settled onto the bed to meditate and review the various medical skills he had acquired, though he realized he would need to keep leveling up to become more effective. He even found an alchemy book that might come in handy. Suddenly, he appeared in his room, asking one of the girls to fetch some herbs from a pot. Back at Mr. Su's house, in a conversation with Dr. Sun, the doctor explained that he couldn't perform surgery because of Mr. Su's age and fragile health. It would be too risky. Suan stepped in, pleading with her grandfather to let King review the case again, even though he didn't see it as important. Her main concern was simply ensuring that her grandfather's care was in good hands. Soon after, King arrived at Mr. Su's house with a pill he asked him to try. Everyone was shocked by the terrible smell. King explained that it was just a mixture of natural herbs, and it would definitely cure his illness. Since it was his first time making it, Dr. Sun looked skeptical, disapprovingly calling him an amateur, but King insisted they could trust him. If it didn't work, it certainly wouldn't harm Mr. Su because it was all natural ingredients. Sun seemed convinced by King's words, but her grandfather still hesitated. Dr. Sun examined the pill, and seeing that it would cause no harm, even said he would call King Master if he really managed to heal the old man. In the end, Mr. Su agreed to give him a chance. The moment he swallowed it, he felt like a completely new person. Sun and the doctor were both stunned by the good news. Dr. Sun even ran to him, asking King to teach him how to do it. Mr. Su tried to shake his hand to thank him, but it wasn't enough. He insisted on giving him a life he wouldn't be able to refuse. After that, King went to check out his new home and by chance ran into his annoying ex-wife. She didn't waste a second before mocking him for being in a rich neighborhood now. King stepped forward, shielding Sun, and explained that he would be living there from now on. Lin and her new husband burst out laughing. King then invited Jin Hu to give him a little lesson, but when the blonde saw Sun, he froze and obeyed, going to the redhead to give her a small reminder of respect. With that done, Sun took King aside, while Yang pulled Jin Hu away from his wife, trying to understand why the guy was afraid of her. Jin Hu explained that he would always be loyal to the Su family. Back inside, King impressed Sun with his incredible cooking skills. She couldn't understand why her former wife had decided to leave him. King mentioned that he had never really gotten along with Lin, nor with her, but he realized something more important. He had a chance with Sun. The two young people exchanged shy glances, but allowed themselves to enjoy the pleasant meal, hoping they'd have time to sort things out later. On the way home, Sun's driver kept talking about King, saying he wasn't a good match for her. Sun didn't see a problem, but the driver went on insisting that her grandfather would never accept him. Tired of hearing it, Sun told him he had no right to judge, especially since King had saved her grandfather's life. The driver said no more. Suan leaned against the window frame, smiling as she looked outside, betting that at most, King would become a local celebrity in a day. 3 days passed. King continued meditating to better understand the new power his father had given him, but his aura was still relatively small despite his fast progress. He hadn't stopped pushing himself, determined to one day be worthy of being with Suan. At one point, he lightly tapped his cheeks, trying to wake himself from these thoughts, convinced it might be impossible, but he still wanted to try. On his way out, he ran into Mr. Yang with a group of clearly dangerous thugs. They obviously had bad intentions. King wanted revenge, but he told everyone that King made it clear that it wasn't convenient for them to mess with him now, backed by Suan's family. But he also made it clear he wouldn't be easily defeated or hurt. The guys felt a bit of fear and turned to see Mr. Yang, who was still ordering them to attack as planned.
Then Shang sighed, focused, and sent the first thug back to the hole he came from with almost no effort. The punch was so intense that everyone froze in fear. Yang landed a strike on another guy, calling attention to how useless they were. Suddenly, Yang got a call from Lin, who wanted him to go to the hospital because her grandfather was in serious trouble. Her shouting spooked King, who tried to figure out what was going on, but Yang said it wasn't the family's concern. He got into his car and sped off. King thought fast, remembering Dr. Sun. He approached the thugs and asked if he could borrow a car, and they agreed immediately to take him wherever he needed to go. Lin was desperate for news about her grandfather, but the doctor tried to calm her, explaining that surgery wasn't an option at the moment. Yang immediately offered a large sum, demanding that they at least attempt the surgery. Our hero entered the room with Dr. Sun this time, who helped him get in smoothly. Dr. Sun followed Shang's instructions while everyone else watched, stunned again at how he knew such famous people. Meanwhile, at Suan's house, Mr. Su noticed his granddaughter deep in thought and immediately guessed it had something to do with King. Suan tried to play it off, but he told her he knew her too well. She asked her grandfather if he would approve of King as a possible match, and Mr. Su said what mattered was whether he made her happy, because he would always support anyone she cared about. Suan explained that the event had been for her, and now it depended on King having the courage to make it work. She felt confident admitting her feelings, and the surgery went well.
Sun had successfully operated on Master Lin, saving his life, and he could go home the next day. Shang thanked him, and Dr. Sun couldn't help asking if he would make another magic pill for the old man. Shang couldn't guarantee it, at least not yet. He reflected on how badly he had always been treated by that family, so giving a magic pill to the master wouldn't be something they would accept easily. Dr. Sun corrected someone for speaking too formally to him, telling them to just call him Shang. At that moment, Yang appeared with those threatening guys again, but King just looked at Dr. Sun to show he was serious one last time. He entered the room calling out to Mr. Yang, greeting him excitedly at finally finding him. Suan, equally thrilled to have found him, was heading toward King, and the redhead offered to take him home since he had finished what he was doing. Yang was left completely stunned, mouth open, for what felt like the 1000th time. Jin Hu approached King asking him to honor his presence at a banquet he was hosting that night. When King initially said no, Jin Hu fell to the ground along with the others, begging him again to accept this small invitation as a way to earn their forgiveness. Yang was confused, watching everyone bowing and pleading for King, who eventually accepted. Jin Hu nearly cried with joy while handing over all the details of the invitation. Of course, Yang got furious at the strange treatment and sent away the people who were with him. Meanwhile, Jin Hu and King laughed and exchanged ideas, but secretly, plans were being hatched against our protagonist. On the day of the meeting, Jin Hu and King were trying to find him when he ran into his former college classmate, Manhwa, along with Shou, his old advisor who once told him he'd never amount to anything. They immediately started teasing him, inviting him to hang out, but King ignored them. Shou laughed loudly, implying he was still hung up on Suan. King turned to her, saying nothing had changed except for his skills, which clearly offended her. She tried to reach him to hit him, but someone else showed up and interrupted everything. This girl had looked after King back in college because she was class president. Manhwa claimed she was his friend and could do whatever she wanted, but then she threw a strong punch at King, who calmly told her her face was in the way. Yo wanted to scold him for being impossible, but King explained that people like Manhwa always bullied girls and needed to learn a lesson. Meanwhile, Shou was taking care of Suan and complaining to King about the consequences he would have to deal with. Jin Hu appeared, cheering him up while he was on the ground until he saw the redhead worried about King accepting his defeat. Manhwa and the girl begged Jin Hu to let them go, and he almost agreed on the condition that they stay on the floor. She approached King to apologize, but he simply returned the words, saying he had no right to speak that way. King then left with the redhead for a private room where Jin Hu handed him a gift. Out of everything, King decided to only take the invitation. He wished he hadn't accepted it, but he knew Jin Hu would insist.
The other guy looked disappointed because a Su family business party was coming up, and he wasn't going to be there. King received the invitation and felt like he had messed up way too much in the past, so he asked for Shang's help. Of course, he wasn't giving it for free, he was offering a commercial street in exchange. Even though he looked calm on the outside, King was thinking about how much money he could make by the end of the day. Later, as he was leaving, his phone rang. It was Master Lin. Shang answered immediately, and Lin said he wanted to talk. King rushed to the hospital to meet Master Lin, who finally realized how badly he had treated him all those years and wanted to thank him for still coming. King's next stop was his own house, where he was waiting for Rainong, a master who seemed curious about King's skill level. When King admitted he was only at the second level of refinement, Rainong assumed he was just some low-tier guy. When Suan tried to defend King, Rainong took the opportunity to explain how the world really worked. Shang stepped forward, telling him to improve his attitude. Irritated, Rainong released his energy, sending King flying, preparing for a fight. Shang tried to calm him, saying he didn't want to fight his friend. Finally, exhausted from insisting, Rainong settled down, and King prepared himself. Suan asked him to be careful. With a few precise moves, Shang emerged victorious, and even Mr. Su couldn't help laughing at his friend. Suan approached King, worried about him, and pinched his arm for scaring her, threatening to lock him in the house if it happened again. King tried to calm her, but Suan said she'd only forgive him if he swore to be faithful to her for the rest of his life. He blushed at what he had just agreed to, and turned to the balcony, followed by Suan. Seconds later, King took the opportunity to invite her to Jin Hu's dinner, and she accepted without hesitation. Then she asked about their relationship, and when King was slow to respond, she playfully slapped him a few times. Suan changed the topic, curious to know if King would defend her if she ever needed help. Without a second thought, he swore he would do so for the rest of his life. Just as things started getting romantic, Mr. Su entered the balcony, making them separate immediately. He wanted to talk to King about the Bingsheng auction, where Suan planned to go with him. Both knew they needed to change outfits before going, and Suan ended up taking King to a luxury store. As expected, it wasn't cheap, but Suan managed to convince King to try on what she picked, making him look very attractive.
Suan got emotional, wanting to buy more and more sets. Then Lin and Yang appeared at the store, curious to see King there. Yang had also apparently learned that King would be at the auction, but Suan stopped him, ending the unnecessary conversation. In the end, they arrived at the auction house. Several items had already been sold, including one King seemed to have won. When the bidding went from 1 million to 5 million by a member of the Su family, the host quickly sold the ring known as the Eternal Love. Everyone applauded the couple, while Lin tried to hold back her anger. Moments later, Lin ran over, shouting at Suan for stealing her ring, and King rushed in, trying to manage the chaos. King tried to calm his wife out of respect for Suan. When the ring was finally handed over to the girl, she explained that she didn't even like it, and if Lin wanted, she could go pick it up from a nearby lake. Lin asked her husband to take revenge as a duty, but in return, Yang offered to get the next item to put things back in the auction room. King tried to understand Suan's actions, but realized there was no point in trying to understand the wealthy. The auction resumed, this time for a very luxurious necklace. King got excited, thinking about giving it to his new girlfriend, and started bidding. The price slowly climbed until it reached 8 million. Lin told Yang it was better to stop, but King took a deep breath and raised it to 20 million without opposition. The event drove everyone wild. In the end, King and Suan ran to the car, both catching their breath. King took the necklace and asked Suan for permission to put it on her. Afterward, he mustered the courage to ask her if she would marry him, on the condition that he secured money and a respectable position in society. Suan gently held his hand and said she wished the future would come quickly for them. King smiled wider than ever. It felt like hitting the jackpot. Lin, meanwhile, was still looking for her silly ring. King continued meditating, reaching a new stage of his cultivation when he received a call from Jin Hu asking him to check on a construction project. Jin Hu had met with Mr. Baikan to understand what was going on at the site, as they had already lost many workers for reasons they couldn't figure out. King explained that the problem was more serious than they thought. A powerful dark aura was spreading through the building in nearby streets. Jin Hu asked if they should halt the work to be safe, but King said it wasn't necessary. He had identified that the issue was caused by something buried underneath and needed to be removed before it got worse. Bei asked where he had gotten the kid from, to which King explained that it wasn't someone to worry too much about. He was simply being cautious. Mr. Bei agreed to let them proceed as long as they apologized if it turned out to be nothing. Jin Hu instructed one of his men to hurry and finish as fast as possible. At one point, the blonde started thinking King might be wrong and shouldn't have been called in. But when the man finished, he found a box radiating a powerful, evil aura. Inside, there was a dagger surrounded by talismans, seemingly indicating some kind of dark magic. Mr. Bei tried to get Jin Hu to admit if anyone had offended him or wanted to harm him, but it didn't seem like that was the case. Jin Hu then asked for King's opinion. King said there was no need to worry anymore, he would take care of it. Mr. Bei asked King about the power he had, but Shang just said he didn't have any abilities to share and then went off into the forest. Shang examined the dagger, remembering how he had felt the same aura around Mr. Su before healing him. Now he was certain someone was plotting against the Su family. After destroying the dagger, the scene moves to the next day, a family gathering where everyone was eager to meet the special guest of the night. King appeared, instantly becoming the center of attention. Lin Hua immediately started mocking him, as usual, saying all sorts of things, but King fired back elegantly, even provoking the guards to step closer. To stop Miss Lin from being so loud and insulting the guests, Suan took the stage, drawing everyone's attention with her poise. She introduced King Shang as her guest of honor and made it clear that anyone with a problem could leave. Young and everyone else were completely stunned when a man appeared asking King a few words in fear. Shang just sighed, grabbed the microphone, and calmly said that even though he was nobody, he would soon prove himself and be worthy of Suan. When the couple stepped down from the stage, Mr. Su wanted to introduce Mr. Sheng Canner as one of the family's major business partners. King immediately noticed the bracelet on Shen Canner's wrist and politely asked him to remove it. Sheng explained that it would only bring disease and misfortune to the family, but Canner refused, saying it was a lucky relic from his son and removing it would offend him. Yang called Scarface to teach King a lesson.
Su asked his daughter Sarah if she would intervene, but she said no. She trusted King completely and knew he could handle the situation. Scarface threw the first punch, but King easily dodged and threw him across the room. Scarface asked his boss for permission to increase his power, but King still defended himself perfectly. Dust and debris filled the room, turning it into a chaotic mess. Scarface got back up, triumphant, until King grabbed him by the arm, locked him in a hold, and slammed him to the ground, declaring his victory. Mr. Su congratulated King, and Ruan admitted he was strong. However, he still refused to remove the bracelet, but he made a bet. If nothing happened to his family in 3 days, the loser would have to apologize on their knees to the entire city. Meanwhile, hiding in some nearby bushes, 2 men were discussing King's power, but didn't see him as a threat. The night continued normally until Lin's sister appeared in front of King to deliver a box from their grandfather. King mentioned that he preferred to receive the box directly from her, but it was clear he was still focused on his cultivation. At the end, he told the girl she could leave. She shyly replied that she wouldn't bother him anymore. Curious about what was inside the box, King opened the box and found 3 items. The most important being a letter from his father. Surprised and emotional, he wanted to read it immediately, but Ruan held his hand, indicating there were too many people around and he should go somewhere safer first. Confused, King followed her to what looked like a fortress, as Ruan had said, where no one would disturb him. Finally, he opened a letter. His father revealed that his mother's name was S-Kin and that she currently lived in Kyoto with a completely ordinary person, but King was warned not to look for her until he reached his absolute power. He let out a sigh, knowing he still had many challenges ahead. Gradually, he returned to the party, acting as if nothing had happened. Suan asked if everything was all right, but before he could answer, a man arrived, panicked, calling for help. Mr. Ran was in danger. Mr. Su was shocked when the man explained that Kanar had returned home only to find his wife, Mrs. Shin, completely unhinged, running around wildly with a razor. Several voices suggested calling a master. King immediately offered to help. Suan mentally prepared herself, aware of the danger, and King headed to Kanar's house. Meanwhile, at home, chaos reigned, though Miss Suan had things partially under control. Scarface tried to calm Kanar, but at that moment, King arrived and was immediately insulted by Ruan, who wanted anyone else to help but him. King asked once again for the bracelet to be removed to end all the trouble. Kanar's son came down the stairs and explained that he had purchased the bracelet from a highly trusted Southern Buddhist temple. Not only was it reliable, but the curse
couldn't have followed him that far. King looked at Kanar's son, urging him to confess the truth while he still could, but the boy kept his word.
King decided to believe him and simply stepped back, knowing there was nothing more to do. Kanar said there was no need for further action. Suddenly, Master B appeared at the house and was warmly welcomed, but he immediately noticed King and whispered, "Master." He asked how serious the situation was, and King said he couldn't do much as they were being overwhelmed. Master B looked a bit concerned, unsure of what he was dealing with. Just as he was preparing to act, Miss Suan freed herself from her restraints. Master B panicked, explaining that she had been possessed and he didn't have the ability to save her. He pointed to King, saying he was the only one who could handle it. Once Juan finished explaining, he stepped aside and asked King to save his wife. King remembered that helping would mean apologizing to the entire city, as he had promised before. Kanar offered 50 million in exchange for his help. After thinking for a moment, King realized money wouldn't be very useful. It would only bring temporary luxury. Seeing the shells full of medicinal herbs, he decided to try using them as barter instead. Kanar agreed. They agreed on the deal with a fur handshake. King told him to hand over the bracelet, but the boy hesitated and shouted. Before he could react, King smashed the bracelet into pieces. Miss Juan fell to the ground as Master B applauded. King looked at Kanar's son, who immediately tried to run, but was easily captured by Scarface. Now with Scarface as an ally, they left the scene for a more private location to talk. In Longhong Village, Scarface was beating Juan's son, waiting for him to confess everything he knew. Meanwhile, King was processing the moment Scarface had pledged his loyalty. The boy began to explain, shouting in frustration, that about a month ago, he had gone to a temple to pray. A man had appeared and given him the bracelet, telling him it was meant to protect his family. But that wasn't all. He wanted to know who the man's master was, so he ended up going to the Chuan Mansion, where notorious cultivators with a strong reputation resided. He had decided to trust them. King told the boy he shouldn't accept gifts from strangers so easily, and that it was foolish to believe a group of evil cultivators would be trustworthy. The boy, frustrated, explained that he hadn't thought much about it at the time. King realized again that he couldn't fully understand other people's motives. Scarface simply returned the boy home. King was still confused. He didn't understand why anyone would want to harm Juan's family by targeting the Su family. The only explanation he could think of was that it was a distraction, but at least now he had a starting point.
He discovered information about the group and realized that the palace itself wasn't the main culprit. It was just a tool. The real problem, King feared, was figuring out and defeating the mind behind it. Still, he had gained some materials to advance another level in his cultivation. Despite eating a lot of vegetables, he only gained a little in his stomach, advancing 3 levels to reach the 6th refinement level of K. At that point, he found Scarface cleaning up. Someone from the Su family had come to invite him to eat. King asked if Scarface had eaten and where he was sleeping. Learning he had been sleeping in the yard, King offered him any of the free rooms and even offered to teach him something to improve his strength later. King arranged things and returned to the Su residence, where he encountered a man with gray hair who couldn't believe King had saved Mr. Su. This man, Ruji, took out a small chest and presented a special lotus flower to Mr. Su, claiming it would extend his life. King laughed, saying it was just a rotten carrot, and that he had a much better pill to strengthen the old man. Ruji and Shen began arguing, each trying to prove that their gift was better. Ruji pulled his Wanam close, saying it didn't matter what King thought, he would end up marrying the girl, uniting 2 wealthy families destined for great fortune. King explains that a marriage based solely on money wasn't what mattered most. He managed to separate Ruji and Shen, making Ruji realize he wouldn't get his way. Ruji, furious, was ready to strike King, but the moment his hand touched him, he felt his bones cracking. He screamed, pointing at King and swearing he would prove he was superior. Mr. Su sighed, concerned about Ruji's family power and what could happen for getting involved. It wasn't that King didn't care, but he had something more important to address before Shin could explain his latest discoveries at Jin Hu's project. The dagger and the bracelet containing a powerful dark energy, both connected in a conspiracy against the Su family. Mr. Su and his granddaughter exchanged confused glances and then started laughing, leaving King completely bewildered. Suan explained that they had known about this ever since arriving in Bingshunk, and even knew who was behind it. She mentioned that they lacked the capacity to confront
confront the Krish directly, because acting rashly could have led to something far worse. King was eager to solve the problem and help, but Mr. Su told him it still wasn't the right time. Seeing King even more puzzled, Suan asked if he knew about Kyoto. He admitted he had only heard of it.
Suan revealed that her family's surname was considered first class in Kyoto, but after things went wrong, she and her grandfather were expelled. They managed to rebuild their fortune in Dingshank, but their enemy quickly found them. King exclaimed in frustration that he hadn't realized how much they had suffered, but vowed to restore their honor. Suan's gaze reflected the anger and desire for revenge she had long held, but then tempered herself, explaining that the most important thing now was for King to take care of himself and fix his life first. King raised 3 fingers, swearing that 3 years would be enough to take care of them properly atop Kyoto, as they deserved. Suan laughed, agreeing to let him handle it if he proved he alone could deal with the Su family situation. King, of course, was more than confident in himself. Meanwhile, at Rugyu's family mansion, he was crying to his father, demanding justice for the humiliation he suffered at King's hands. Mr. D approached, loudly questioning how anyone could dare do that in front of his son. After judging his son on the sofa and putting on his coat with the young lady's help, he decided to take the opportunity to confront King personally, aiming to blackmail the Su family and fulfill his son's dream of marrying Suan. It wasn't long before Mr. D arrived at the Su residence, attempting to appear calm among the servants. He boldly faced King, coffee in hand, trying to dominate the conversation. King pointed out that it had been Mr. D's son who had tried to attack him first. Mr. D arrogantly boasted of his power, claiming he could do whatever he wanted, and even offered King the chance to kneel and beg forgiveness so his son could marry Suan. King stood upright, rejecting the notion immediately. Instead, he used the precise finger technique, sending Mr. D flying across the room. Mr. D screamed in shock, and King calmly said it was only a warning. King decided to give Mr. D a lesson, but the moment the man thought it was just a minor scratch, he left, warning that he would regret not kneeling when he had the chance. King politely bid farewell, sighing how tiresome it was to deal with such arrogant people. Suan came out to meet him, asking if it was over. King explained that he had only used a spell to affect Mr. D's mind, one that wouldn't cause serious harm. Both seemed satisfied with his methods, but nothing could shake their trust in King. Then, King mentioned an herbal market where he wanted to try his luck. In his mind, he figured that improving his strength a bit wouldn't hurt, just in case Rugi or his family tried to meddle again.
Eventually, King left with Scarface, ready to catch the bus. Scarface hesitated, thinking King's current status didn't require using public transport, but King scolded him for worrying about social class. After that, Scarface was convinced and followed him onto the bus. The ride was uncomfortable, and both arrived exhausted. Scarface even offered to buy King a car so he wouldn't have to endure such trips again. Suddenly, someone called King's name. Looking up, he saw Yao Yao, who seemed thrilled at their unexpected reunion. Apparently, she had just been fired, which King found hard to believe. In short, Yao Yao explained that her former superior had been promoted and made her life a living hell. King was ready to help, but she insisted she could manage, as her sister had arranged a new job for her. At that moment, Yang appeared, teasing King for his simple clothes. Yao Yao quickly intervened, introducing her former university colleague to King. Hearing the name, King realized Yang's boyfriend might have mistaken him for the supposed heir of the Su family. Yang clarified the confusion and invited King into his car simply because he was a friend of Yao Yao's sister. But he had to promise he had no ulterior motives, or there would be trouble. They all went to the restaurant for the gang's invitation. Yao Yao explained that afterward, they would sign an important contract with Mr. Lee, which frightened his eye due to the man's reputation as a notorious troublemaker. Yang reassured them it wouldn't be a problem, but reminded them they would need to learn how to deal with difficult people. Shan Shen expressed concern, so King offered to accompany her along with Scarface, ensuring that no one dared cause trouble. Yang accepted, allowing them to enter without needing further help. Sometime later, at Bing Shank's second construction site, the sisters were waiting with their project papers. Mr. Lee quickly glanced at the young woman and invited her to sit down to discuss the contract more comfortably. Yang intervened immediately, irritating the man. He pulled the girl's hand, telling her brother to step aside and let them handle the business alone. Meanwhile, Yang discreetly marked King
King with his phone, luckily finding him right there. King stepped into the room politely, managing to make Mr. Lee uneasy. He introduced himself formally, shaking Mr. Lee's hand, and squeezed it so hard that the man twisted in discomfort, regretting all his past actions. King released him and asked what he intended to do about the contract.
Mr. Lee, flustered but eager, confirmed he would sign it. As the three left, smiling as if nothing had happened, Mr. Lee quickly checked his phone and sent a message to Mr. D, requesting his presence at the company. Meanwhile, Mr. D couldn't even answer his phone. He was in a rough spot. Many doctors had been called to figure out what was wrong with him, but all signs indicated he was completely sane. Ruji then assumed King might be to blame, which enraged Mr. D. He ordered a car to take him immediately to the Su residence. Within minutes, they arrived, finding only Mr. Su at home. Mr. Jin quickly knelt, begging for help, but Mr. Su explained he could do nothing. Only King could intervene. In a slightly more cunning tone, Mr. Su emphasized that King had gone to Bing Shang with urgency. Mr. D grumbled loudly until his phone vibrated. He found a message from Mr. Lee. Back at Bing Shang's second construction site, Mr. Lee presented himself to King, repeatedly asking what needed to be done. With a snap of his fingers, many of his men entered the room carrying various delicacies for tasting, which King couldn't resist accepting. They also invited the Gong sisters, but they didn't seem very hungry. Meanwhile, Mr. Lee kept glancing at his watch. When he learned that the hero had arrived, the girls looked a bit worried. Mr. Lee took the opportunity to declare his victory to King, saying that pretending to be kind to buy time had been his best move. He then turned to Gong Yu, instructing her to hand over her sister if she still wanted the contract signed. Suddenly, Mr. D kicked the door open, approaching King with a stack of manuscripts, all as part of an offer. King admitted he had been defeated. He asked Mr. Lee if he was one of his men, prompting the man to kneel and apologize quickly to avoid further trouble.
King then moved to finalize the deal with the young woman. Satisfied with their response, King finally let out his irritation, feeling like himself again, and Mr. Lee gave him numerous gifts, promising more once he returned to the city. Everything concluded smoothly, and Gong admitted that her boyfriend hadn't been wrong about King. She extended her hand, asking him to reach out if he ever needed anything, but she forbade him from approaching her sister. Yao Yao showed visible disappointment, but King reassured her that he already had someone in mind. Once they finished their business, Gong offered to drop King wherever he needed, and asked if he knew of any good auction houses that specialized in medicinal materials. King was guided by Shannon, who couldn't stop bragging about having chosen the perfect place to find the best supplies. King, curious, explained that he had some knowledge of plants, a hobby he had picked up from his family's construction background and university studies. Shannon crossed her arms, slightly annoyed, hearing her husband insist that he should buy a single leaf. Finally, they arrived at the auction house, and King was impressed by its sheer size. It was clear this edition would be intense, with a huge crowd attending. The conversation ended abruptly when the crowd began shouting excitedly the name Shu Sin. Shannon quickly grabbed her phone to locate the young woman, and when King admitted he didn't know who she was, she pushed through the crowd, pointing her out. Shannon explained that Shu had debuted as a singer at 18 and became nationally famous just 2 years later. King wondered why someone like her would be hosting a medicinal plant auction. Shannon clarified that it was for her grandfather, who was gravely ill. Shu hadn't stopped pursuing and securing all the medicinal herbs she could, and Shannon remarked that King might end up leaving empty-handed. Men settled into their seats as the auction was about to begin. The first item didn't catch King or Shun's attention, but the next one did. King silently prayed that Shun wouldn't increase her bid. Of course, luck was not on his side. Shun kept bidding, pushing the price to $20 million. King's frustration was visible as he countered with $30 million, then $50 million, and eventually $80 million. Shun pushed it to $100 million, leaving Shannon completely astonished. King considered letting her win, acknowledging that Shu had been right all along. Suddenly, Shu's grandfather began feeling very ill, alarming everyone around. Shu handed over her card to claim the plant and instructed her doctor to prepare the medicine immediately. Shannon rushed forward, offering to assist, but Shun initially refused. The doctor allowed King to intervene, recognizing his expertise. King, understanding the urgency, managed to convince Shun to let him help, promising that he knew exactly what he was doing. Shun thought for a moment, but considering her grandfather's critical condition, agreed to let King treat him, offering any resources he might need. King then focused on the plant Shu had just purchased, requesting it as a reward. Shun handed it over without hesitation.
With Shu's grandfather settled in his chair, King reassured Shannon that he was confident in his abilities. He then entered his internal spiritual realm, preparing to work with the medicinal plant. Now, with prior experience and greater knowledge, he hoped it wouldn't be too difficult. Shang began to summon the spirit of the dragon that resided within him. The majestic creature rose before him, reminding him that it had granted him a new life only because his father had requested it. Shang extended his hand toward the dragon, commanding it to concentrate its vital energy into his palm. The dragon let out a frustrated sigh, remarking that Shang was just like his father when he was young. Still, it agreed to his request, and even promised to teach him the technique of eternal life. Shang stretched out his arms, absorbing the new power. In the room, a massive whirlwind formed, making everyone believe a miracle was occurring. Part of the energy emanating from Shang traveled toward the sick man, finishing the process of curing him completely. Shun threw herself into her grandfather's arms, overwhelmed with emotion, while the doctor wept tears of joy. Shun held on to the medicinal plant, thanking the young woman for the arrangement. Shun agreed that the plant was now his, and even invited him to join them for a celebratory meal, but Shang politely declined, explaining that he had other matters to attend to. Each returned to their own activities. Shun reminded Shang to visit every 2 months to deliver the freshly prepared medicines. Shun, curious, asked how much it would cost, and Shang casually mentioned 20 million. Shun was shocked by the high price, but Shang left the decision to her, walking away without a word. Later, Shang met up with Scarface, who had bought a car for both of them. Now ready to experiment with the new plant he had obtained, Shang returned to the residence of the elder La Zhu. There, he encountered the elder and a man with purple hair. Both elders bid farewell and went their separate ways, but the purple-haired man attempted to attack Shang. Shang easily intercepted him, making him stumble, and warned him to watch his step before letting him go. Shang then checked on the elder, who appeared very stable. The elder expressed an important decision. He planned to move to the capital to enjoy life with old friends, confident that Suan would be safe under Shang's protection. Shang's emotions surged when the young woman reminded him not to rush, assuring him that there were plenty of rooms in the village for him to choose from. Meanwhile, in the car with the elder D, he asked the purple-haired man's opinion of Shang. He admitted that Shang seemed cunning and resourceful, a sort of magician, whereas he was a martial artist. He recognized Shang's intelligence and vowed not to underestimate him, confident that Shang could be victorious. Satisfied with this assessment, Elder D declared that they would take action once the Elder Su left the city. The day finally arrived, and it seemed the entire town had gathered to bid farewell. Tears were shed, and heartfelt wishes were expressed for their safe return. Suan also cried during the farewell.
As the elder Su asked Shang once more to take care of her, the car departed. Shang comforted Suan, reminding her that they would return home soon. As the vehicle drove off, the townspeople turned their attention to the young woman, offering their well wishes and farewells. They were going off to eat and do other things when Shang stepped in to explain to the guys that they were wrong. Even though Senor Su had left the city, Miss Suan should still be addressed with proper respect as the owner of Big Shank. The guys didn't respond right away, but eventually left, furious, swearing they'd settle things with him later. After that, Shang holds Suan, who looked a bit shaken. She expressed how hard things would be now without her grandfather, since many would compete for her attention, and it didn't matter if they were friends or family. Everyone became hunters and prey in a pointless competition. All she wanted that day was to rest. Meanwhile, at the old Protlin house, she was checking her social media when she came across the latest news that Senor Su had left this city. She quickly called Pari to share the good news. Not only could they continue with their business, but more importantly, it was her chance to take over. You also thought it might be a good idea to take care of Suan. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from the doors, alerting the couple. Several guys in red AA outfits and dark cloaks appeared. One of them extended an arm and a shotgun suddenly came out of his sleeve, making the two young people fall to the ground in a clear gesture of submission. They were scared, but the guys just remembered their old words. Sacrifices meant nothing when it came to reaching their goals. Suan and Shang returned home, and Scarface rushed over, very agitated, when he heard Shang had arrived. He said a man in white had come to talk to him, and even though he refused to let him in, the guy entered anyway. Shang first calmed Scar, thanking him for his work, and assured him he could now leave things in Prota's hands. Suan was worried about what might be happening, but Prota explained that he had forgotten about his meeting with the man. Suan breathed a sigh of relief and said they'd have to apologize properly for the oversight and for not letting him know sooner. Both of them went into the house. Prota was the first to apologize to the man for taking so long to return. The man politely said it was fine. Suan passed by to go to her room while Shang invited the man into the kitchen for a drink. The man said he was fine with anything, as he was more interested in using Prota's distraction to catch him off guard. When he tried to make his move, he didn't expect Shang to duck just in time, spotting a drink that shouldn't have been there.
When Shang turned to his guest, the man was standing there as if nothing had happened. He looked at the drinks and chose the tea, seriously wondering what had just unfolded before his eyes, attributing it all to Prota's luck. At that moment, Shang confirmed his choice, saying it was time to boil some water. While he was busy, the man with rusty hair approached stealthily, ready to try a different move, certain that the man couldn't have that much luck twice in a row. But once again, his plan failed because Shang was clumsy and accidentally spilled boiling water on the man's hand. With the tray ready, containing everything he needed to enjoy his tea, Shang couldn't help but laugh a little at the scene of the purple-haired man on the floor. The man got up, confused by what had just happened, as he considered Prota weak and incapable. Shang arranged the cups and other things on the table, while the man with rusty hair was planning something new, this time with a sharp weapon in hand, ready to move fast. Prota suddenly shifted, curious to look around the house, remembering that Senior Su had asked for more flowers to be placed around. Otherwise, the man would have crashed straight into the table, banging his head hard. Shang looked at him, worried about what had just happened. The man was completely confused. No one could have that much luck 3 times in a row. Shang extended his cup of tea while serving it, and the man took it, trembling and a little reluctant, barely able to believe the boy could react so quickly, even to an attack from behind. Then Shang asked him directly why he was there. The man replied that it was nothing really, just that he remembered he had something else to do. As he got up to leave, he ran into Pra right in front of him, asking if he had given up after being given 3 chances to hit him. Unable to hide it any longer, the man explained that he was a 3rd-degree martial artist and expected to be let go before getting hurt. Shang, of course, mocked him and teased him. He smiled, excited, as in the blink of an eye he appeared behind the man trying to strike him. The man managed to defend himself, but was pushed back hard, breaking part of the floor. Shang said he was useless for not even managing to touch him in all the chances he had. But that didn't matter. What he really wanted to know was whether Senior Su had sent him. The purple-haired man had no choice but to admit Shang was right. Though he insisted he had nothing to do with it, it was just his job. Shang didn't plan to hurt him, but asked him to leave, telling him he would get one last chance to fail. After that, the man bowed to the protagonist, promising to deliver his message. Suan came down the stairs, asking if the fight was over. The man hurried to leave, while Suan stayed curious, trying to figure out who he really was. Meanwhile, Senior D enjoyed a good cup of tea in his comfortable chair. One of his men handed him a phone, and they heard the martial artist's voice transmitting Shang's message.
Senor D was furious for having paid so much money to the purple-haired guy, even throwing the phone in anger. Within seconds, hooded men appeared behind him, offering their help. Meanwhile, at Jin Hu's company, he was taking care of the district that Prota had given him, but things didn't seem to be going well. Suddenly, he answered a call from Yang, who introduced himself formally, offering something that could help with the problems he was facing. The news seemed to calm Jin Hu's anger, though he wanted more details about what was being offered. He saw Ando surrounded by a huge centipede threatening his life. He agreed that if they met with Shang, they could reach an agreement. He hung up, handed the phone to a man, and asked him to release Ando. Still, the hooded man didn't seem very sure about letting him go. Ando threw himself to the ground, begging to be left alone, even offering his wife and sister-in-law if needed. For a moment, the man just smiled until he finished off the miserable guy who wanted to sell everything as if it meant nothing. Now, they'd have to do something too if they wanted to survive. After these events, Jin Hu didn't wait long to contact Prota and accompany him to a meeting point that seemed suspicious suspiciously isolated. When they went up to the upper floor, they found a man with two identical young women. Jin Hu tried to rush the man so they could finalize their business, but the man just smiled and extended his hands. Before Jin Hu could react, the girls leapt toward the two of them. Shang jumped forward to defend him, grabbing the girls' hands and swinging them in a wide arc, sending them crashing hard to the floor. Shang shook out his hands and looked at the old man, waiting for his next move. The old man summoned a thick, dark mist that clouded the entire area. Shang suggested everyone leave while they still could, but he himself took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused. He spotted the old man through the fog and quickly smiled, striking him in the chest and sending him flying into the wall. The man seemed to say something, then collapsed, and the mist dissipated. Shang then searched for Jin Hu and followed him to the door he indicated. Upon opening it, he found Lin. A funny moment ensued when he pulled the tape from her mouth and she screamed in fear. Shang reassured her that rescuing her wasn't a big deal, but Lin went further, swearing she'd listen to him from now on. Satisfied, Shang asked Jin Hu to handle things, then carried Lin over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes to bring her with them. After leaving the curious, now empty house in the woods, the three of them walked back toward the main house. Shang raised his hand to alert the others, having spotted someone among the trees. As they approached, the man called out Prota's name. Clearly injured, Shang crouched, worried, telling him to stay silent and save his strength. He explained that he was Suan's secret bodyguard, always responsible for protecting her. Shang panicked, asking frantically what had happened.
The man couldn't hold back his tears of anger for failing to protect her, explaining that she had been taken somewhere and he couldn't bear the guilt. Shang clenched his fists in rage. Meanwhile, Suyan was tied up with a crazy man who seemed thrilled to have her there. He told her that her brave and determined gaze excited him, but made it clear that she had to cooperate to avoid getting hurt. She stayed calm and defiant, despite her position. When the man slapped her cheek, showing he wasn't afraid to hit her just because she was who she was, he then yanked her hair, mocking her as a daddy's girl, saying all that was left was to receive payment for his work before disappearing. He let her fall again, leaving her with 5 minutes to think before he wouldn't hold back if she resisted. So-yeon was certain her life wasn't in immediate danger, but it was clear her grandfather was the one with real power in this situation. Now, all she could hope was that Shang wouldn't act too impulsively. Meanwhile, he kept yelling at Jin Hu to hurry. When they arrived at the village, they found all the guards outside, apparently waiting anxiously for them. Apologizing for not being strong enough to protect Suyan, Shang reassured them that he understood. The man explained what had happened. Miss Suyan had been taken in a van. Despite alerting the police, they hadn't received any news yet. When Shang asked about Scarface, the guards said he was in the hospital with broken arms. Shang began calculating the strength they might be up against. When the man asked what they could or should do, Shang explained that one group would continue searching while the other would call Ansia. Jin Hu only needed to keep watch over Suyan and Lin. Prota then allowed himself to tap into the knowledge stored in his mind, eventually finding a method to locate Suyan quickly. It was a powerful technique, but after seeing Suyan defend him so many times, Shang wasn't afraid to face whatever came for her. He crouched, bit his thumb, and invoked the art of golden threads, starting his search until he saw a location, but it erupted in colors that startled all his men. Still, Shang ignored it and indicated that everyone should head to Mount Ban, east of Bing City. The purple-haired man returned to the cabin and knocked on the door, expecting a clever response from Suyan, but she barely moved to acknowledge him. He smiled and began bragging, saying he had taken many girls in his life, but never seen one who faced death so fearlessly and defiantly. Somehow it seemed to impress her. Before he could react further, Shang appeared behind him at the perfect moment, shouting. The man jumped, confused about how he had been found, only to be hit with a powerful strike to the stomach, sending him airborne. Shang joined his hands and slammed him back down with furious strength, even breaking a floorboard in the process. Grabbing him by the hair and locking eyes, Shang demanded to know who had ordered this. The man admitted he was Senor D, the mastermind behind it all. Shang was shocked at the audacity of wasting his 2 chances so foolishly. The man insisted he only lived off this work and swore he hadn't intentionally hurt Suyan. Shang, enraged, shouted him to look at the huge bruise on her face.
The man had no words to explain. Shang grabbed him by the neck as he repeatedly apologized, but Shang showed no mercy.
saying it was too late. He threw him to the ground and turned to Suan, who asked worriedly if he was still alive. He reassured her that he was and wouldn't dare do anything else, leaving him with a choice: never do something like this again. After freeing Suan from all her restraints, Shang hugged her tightly as she trembled in fear. She tried to calm her sobs, saying it was okay, and Shang promised she wouldn't face danger again. She ran her fingers through his hair and smiled at him, trusting his words. With that, they prepared to return home, where everything was a total mess because Scarface had been trying to find Prota and Miss Suan. Someone outside shouted that they had finally returned. The doctor examined the young woman, saying a healing ointment would help her recover. The doctor applied the ointment to help the wound heal faster, and both of them thanked him. Just in time, Scarface appeared, tears in his eyes for having failed at his duty. He told Prota he'd accept any reprimand, even being fired, but Shang helped him up, explaining that he knew Scarface could have done better. Shang asked a bit more about the men who had attacked, and Scarface explained that he'd seen another man besides the one who had captured Lin. Shang's anger went through the roof, but his friend added that the other man was dressed all in black and carried a casket in his hands. Scarface explained that the man had bitten someone and immediately paralyzed him. Shang thought for a moment and an idea popped into his mind, something about Shangming Palace. He gave his men the necessary instructions to protect Suan, while Scarface was asked to watch the main entrance and report immediately if anything happened. Shang grabbed his car keys, knowing he would need to meet a door soon to explain exactly what he had planned. Just as he was about to get in the car, Suan called out quietly and gestured toward the bushes on the right. She had noticed something moving there. Shang quickly explained it to Jin Hu, and they approached cautiously. Shang managed to pull Ruji out by his jacket. Well, you can imagine what happened next. The guy got a serious beating. After that, they tied him up, waiting until he had no choice but to confess everything. Ruji explained that it had all started a few days ago. After his father's previous plans failed, he decided to involve other people from the underworld thanks to some contacts.
Jinru whispered to Prota that they could just hand Lin over. She wasn't a good person, didn't deserve protection, and they could even use her as bait to get to the palace. Shang immediately rejected the idea, wondering why anyone would go through so much trouble to get rid of their ex-wife. Then, they heard a loud laugh. Both men turned and realized it had all been a distraction and that Shang had been sent away. He ordered RVO to keep an eye on Ruji and call him if things got tough. What no one saw was Shang's true inner power. He ran as fast as he could, trusting the other men to handle any problems. Suddenly, his senses sharpened, and he unleashed a new technique throughout his body, creating a talisman. One of the villains was running with young Lin, thinking everything they'd heard about Prota had been exaggerated, but Shang suddenly burst out of the forest, running over the water like lightning, catching up to the man. The man panicked, trying to run faster, but it was useless. Shang summoned a massive hand. The man decided to stop and tried to call forth a powerful spirit to defend himself, but Shang simply activated a new talisman, spoke a few words, and finally defeated him. Lin fell from his cold hands, but before she sank into the lake, Shang grabbed her dress, letting her breathe, and carried her back to the mansion. Shang scolded himself for feeling she was so exhausted, even after reaching the foundation stage. Shang called Jin Hu to help carry her, but then there was complete silence. Fear began to show on Prota's face. Shang walked into the house, finding Scarface and all the other men unconscious on the floor. The same fate had befallen the leaves they had held before. Ruji's restraints were now destroyed. Shang thought immediately of his dear wife and rushed into the mansion, preparing to scold himself again for not protecting her. He threw open the doors, calling out her name, and finally caught his breath when he saw her lying in bed. The noise woke Suan, who slowly got up, still sleepy. Shang reassured her, and without thinking, he dropped Lin to run and hug Suan, leaving her a little confused. He expressed his fear and concern, and Suan hugged him back, comforting him and asking him to take the rest he deserved. They stayed embraced for a long time, nearly passing out until the next day. Shang was awakened by sunlight and the pleasant smell of food from the kitchen. He put on his coat from yesterday and went downstairs to find Suan cooking. She turned, surprised he was up so early. Shang asked her to rest a little longer. Shang explained that there were still many things to do and that he hadn't been able to rest properly, but for now, he let his curiosity take over, wondering what Suan was cooking. She quickly hid the pot behind her back, wanting to keep it a surprise.
The pot wasn't hot though, so when Shang reached to check, she couldn't prevent him from looking. He asked if she had made noodles, and that was almost right. She had actually made a big batch of dough that was too much to eat all at once. Suddenly, Shang grabbed a plate with great excitement to serve himself, and Suan tried to stop him. When she realized she couldn't, she served herself a bit as well. They went to the dining room, and Suan realized the food was far too sweet. She had accidentally used sugar instead of salt, as usual. She looked at Shang, trying to tell him he didn't have to eat it if it tasted so bad. Obviously, salt and sugar are very different. Shang dismissed her worries, saying it was fine and that it tasted good to him. Suan probably didn't believe him, but he was happy. Suddenly, the news on the TV behind him caught his attention. There had been a fire at his family's house. No details were known about the whereabouts of anyone inside. In other news, Sir Young had been found dead, and the only thing known was that they blamed him. It was obvious that Senor Day and Young had been in close contact over the past few days, so the investigation would proceed quickly. Suan asked Shang if he had anything to do with it. When she realized he didn't, she wondered who could be responsible. Shang didn't have an answer either. What he did know was that both Senor Day and Young were seeking revenge, and that things were escalating. Scarface had been hurt in the chaos, and so many theories ran through their heads, but something always seemed to complicate the situation. Suan wondered if the real culprits might have attacked them during the night. She even questioned whether they were after her grandfather. Shang knew that wasn't possible, since the problems were ongoing in Bing. Lin mentioned that it was all because of her sister. The couple turned, surprised to see the girl still in their house, but Lin explained that she and her sister had been kidnapped in their own home, and the man who held them seemed obsessed. Shang thought it was ridiculous that S was so fixated on the blonde, while Senor Day was desperate for the plan to move forward. When S tried to approach, a giant centipede coiled around his arm, completely terrifying him. He was upset at first, but after reconsidering, he agreed to follow the men's original plan. He crouched and brought the phone closer to Yu so he could speak with Jin Hu, just as they had planned. Lin continued explaining that the old man had followed the original plan of taking Suan and causing harm. Now she was sure that Senor D had also lost his life like her husband, and she had no idea what his future plans might be. Shang thought it made sense that things were getting increasingly strange. Suan asked Lin what she would do now. Tears quickly started streaming down her face. She had just lost her husband, her sister was missing, and after everything she had endured, she didn't even know how to move forward.
Worse, she didn't feel she could ask Proda for help after everything that had happened. She only asked that he set up a monument in case they were found dead. Shang sighed and stood, promising to help. Not to save King, but simply to eliminate any threat to those close to them, like Suan and Jin Hu. Lin couldn't hold back her tears and began crying while thanking Proda for who he was. At that moment, a new voice entered the room, mocking the state of their family with a sense of amusement. Shang immediately stepped in front of Suan. A man walked in as if nothing were wrong, commenting on how ugly the Su family house was despite all their wealth. Shang recognized him. It was Suan's brother, Sununyu. Sununyu asked irritably what Shang was doing there. He tried to feign sadness, pretending he hadn't been noticed or welcomed after being absent for many years. He said Shang should at least call him brother, which made Suan cross her arms, explaining that they had cut ties long ago. She asked what he was doing there. Sununyu replied that he had only learned that their grandfather had taken something important and wanted to ask her if she knew where the old man was. Suan said she didn't and told him he could leave. Sununyu seemed pleased that his sister didn't know about the project he was referring to. Suan was growing increasingly impatient, and when she threatened to call the police, Sununyu laughed loudly, reminding her who he was and that no one dared interfere with him. Sununyu moved closer to give her advice, but Shang slapped his hand away, stopping him. Sununyu stood there for a moment, glaring at Proda, irritated by his audacity, asking who he thought he was. After stating his name, Sununyu fully realized who Shang was. He raised his hand to strike from the right with a fast motion, but Shang dodged just in time, surprising him. Shang knew Sununyu was much stronger than him and that he was still slightly injured, but what bothered him most was that he didn't want Suan to be affected by this situation. Suddenly, Sununyu lunged at Shang to strike him. Shang barely managed to defend himself, but he was sent flying. He barely managed to defend himself when Shang tried to strike him, but Sununyu dodged skillfully. Suan ran quickly to Shang, but he stood up and told her to stay back, fearing for her safety. Lin ended up falling to the ground as Shang faced the man again. Sununyu seemed satisfied having knocked him down, even congratulating him for not being so bad.
He boasted about how many men he had defeated as the king of Binch and warned Shang not to interfere with him or the family business again. Shang stepped in front of Suan once more, explaining that her business was his too, and he would never let this man do anything against her will. Suyu laughed as if nothing mattered and turned to Shang, irritated by his arrogance. Then he proposed a challenge. Shang was confused, although in reality the stakes had already been broken. Suyu bragged about how his level 2 was higher than Shang's, something Shang tried to ignore. Then Suyu got straight to the point. He gave Shang 2 years to reach Kyoto, or else he would take Suan and destroy her. Shang accepted the challenge confidently, even though he still didn't understand why he needed to reach Kyoto. Suyu smiled excitedly, spreading his arms, delighted at the thought of a grand battle in the most luxurious setting of the city. It didn't matter who won or lost, Shang's name would spread everywhere. Suyu extended his hand, waiting for Shang to accept the agreement. Shang shook it. Suyu turned to say one last thing to his sister, to greet their grandfather and to be careful, because the next visitor wouldn't be as patient or friendly as him. With that, Suyu explained to Shang what he was facing, only a tiny fragment of divine consciousness borrowing a human body. If Shang wanted to win, he would have to be much stronger. Shang thanked him for the advice, but said he didn't need to worry about any of that. Suyu took his hat and left. After he was gone, Shang thought about the great clans in Kyoto and realized he was right. He wasn't ready yet. Suan pulled him out of his thoughts to confess that her grandfather had left a letter before leaving. In it, he explained that if Shang faced a difficult situation, he should seek Fan Jianal of the Provincial Security Department, who had been his disciple and could help him. Shang knew he could trust Senior Su, but it was Jen's expression that worried him. Suan lowered his gaze and explained that in her grandfather's world and high society, you couldn't move forward without relying on someone else. Back then, her grandfather had been a pillar of support, but now that he was in conflict with his family, things could get harder. Shang held Suan's hand and encouraged her, explaining that he could handle the situation on his own, even if it took a bit more time. Someone knocked on the door. When they opened it, 2 police officers were there, asking for both of them. They had come to invite Shang and Suan to a dinner with Mr. Fun. Shang was impressed by the coincidence.
The officers didn't have many details about the invitation and just asked them not to refuse. The couple looked at each other for a moment and asked for a little time to get ready for the evening. Sun told Shang more about Mr. Fan and the important people who would also be attending, reassuring him that they could feel safe. Finally, she emphasized that they should allow themselves to relax and enjoy a little, which Shang accepted, trusting her word. Suddenly, a female voice called out to him. When he turned, he was suddenly hugged by a girl with orange hair, Xiaomei. She hadn't seen him for over half a year and was thrilled to see that he was still so gentle and kind. Then she noticed Shang and introduced herself as the only daughter of the Fan family. She seemed proud of her surname, but Sun explained that she had always been like that. When Xiaomei learned Shang's real name, she approached, assuming he was as special as everyone said. Shang just wanted to ignore her comments because they didn't concern him, but Xiaomei quickly explained that she wouldn't allow just anyone to get close to her goddess, Sun, because of her beauty and refinement. Xiaomei warned Shang that he could only be with Sun if she liked him too. If she discovered anything wrong about him, he would have serious problems. Once Xiaomei calmed down a bit, she wanted to ask Sun if she remembered Belle. Sun said yes. Xiaomei shared rumors that he wanted to take revenge on Rugi's friend. Sun couldn't help but laugh, asking if Xiaomei really believed that. Sun remembered that her grandfather had told her many times that Belle had no courage at all, always protected by Senior Fan. Confronting Shang was a foolish fantasy. Xiaomei looked at Shang, still doubting that he was really powerful, when several voices announced the official arrival of Fang. The dangerous man entered the room in his class uniform. People were already talking about where he studied, where he graduated, and even some of his great physical achievements. Xiaomei also spoke up, explaining that behind her father was Hyal, as always. She stared at Shang, asking if he wouldn't step forward to properly greet her father. Shang just circled his cup, responding firmly that he didn't know him and didn't feel obligated to do so. Apparently, Hyal heard this and quickly ordered his men to bring Shang forward to show respect to his superior. Suddenly, Fang intervened and stopped them, reminding them that Shang was still part of the Su family and that disliking him didn't give them the right to act recklessly. Hyal understood the order and walked directly to Shang, intending to confront him differently. Meanwhile, Yo tried to give Shang an indirect opportunity to respond,
Shang just asked why he should even greet him, barely holding back his frustration. Suan called Qi over, arms crossed, and asked if the capital was really that insignificant by his standards, while also bowing politely to the young woman. She kept scolding him for being the one who lacked manners. After all, Shang was her guest. When Yao tried to defend himself, Suan interrupted him, telling him to start over. He understood, but could only curse in his mind, swearing revenge for when he succeeded. Then she turned to the protagonist, saying that Senior Feng was inviting him. Shang responded politely, accepting the invitation, silently grateful that he had accepted. Shang walked towards the center where the man was waiting. Face to face, Shang showed his courtesy, greeting him respectfully, thanking him for the invitation, and even asking why he had been called there. Feng held the protagonist's shoulder with emotion, explaining that he just wanted to see who he really was, since many in the capital had been talking about him. He asked if it had been Shang who'd caught the fugitive, which made Shang a little embarrassed. Shang admitted he hadn't done anything. At that moment, a man grabbed his hand, asking him to join the security agency as an instructor. Shang started to get nervous thinking about being fired, when Yao slammed the table, asking Senior Feng if he even knew whether the guy was qualified for such a position after knowing him for just a few minutes. Qing turned to the man and explained that even if he wasn't interested, he was more than capable. Feng couldn't ignore her words and said that if he could beat him, he could accept him as an instructor. Shang looked at him without showing interest, explaining that he'd probably end up behind bars, which would be a problem, but Feng said he could handle that. Shang picked up a cup and repeated that he wasn't interested in the position.
If he wanted, he could bet on something else. She agreed, saying that if he beat him, he would have to apologize publicly and recognize him as the leader, which pleased the protagonist. But now, he was curious about what he could gain. They both toasted. Shang drank and explained that he wouldn't lose on his watch. Yao smiled confidently, grateful that Rugi hadn't been wrong when describing him, and now she was even more certain that he could handle matters for his friend. Suddenly, Feng let out a laugh hearing how competitive the young people were, though a bit reckless too. He explained to the protagonist that Yao was one of the 3 prodigies in his agency, only 25 years old and already at the master level when it came to internal energy. Shang wasn't exactly sure what that level meant, but he understood it was very high, reserved for the strongest of the strong. Feng, curious about the protagonist's level, focused his energy into his left hand, explaining that he was at that level but still didn't have enough strength. Even so, he knew he had plenty of time to reach it soon. Feng quickly realized the protagonist's great power and got excited about the promising future ahead. The protagonist was clearly uncomfortable with Suan. She explained that her father always acted that way whenever someone interested him. Then, another official approached her to whisper something which startled her and made her explode. It seemed they hadn't been able to get tickets to see some gnome, which the protagonist immediately recognized as the girl from the auction. Shang knew it wasn't easy to get those tickets, but was willing to lend a little help. Xiao approached, trying to spot a lie on the protagonist's face. A thought quickly struck her, and she pulled Suan's arm and pointed at the protagonist and hinting that he was flirting with anyone.
Shang raised his hands in innocence, explaining that they had a business relationship. Suan couldn't help but be curious and asked more about this business. Shang started getting nervous. Suddenly, Suan moved closer, asking if he had met her when traveling to another city, and Xiao demanded an answer too. Realizing it was worse to avoid the question, Shang told the whole truth. He had saved the singer's grandfather. Slightly annoyed, Suan commented that he seemed to have a real talent for saving girls' grandfathers. Shang explained that it wasn't some kind of flirt. On the other hand, Xiao had no reason to interfere anymore and approached the protagonist, excitedly asking if he could really get tickets for her. The protagonist agreed, asking how many she needed. When Xiao said 3, he grabbed his phone to send a text. Suddenly, the girl interrupted, saying it would be better to call and talk to all 3 in person to avoid any suspicion from Suan. Shang wasn't completely sure, but agreed. In the following days, after arranging the meeting, Shang could hardly contain his nerves, feeling like he was on the most dangerous battlefield in the world. The girls were calmly drinking tea when someone entered the mansion wearing a hat, glasses, and a mask to avoid being recognized. Shun complained to the protagonist about all the security, almost not letting him pass. After taking off all the disguise, Xiao was the first to stand up and introduce herself politely. A name was recognized by the artist, who asked if he was a member. From her fan club, Shun also seemed touched to recognize him,
him, which melted the young girl's heart. Fengxun gently stroked her hair, thanking her for the support, until his gaze shifted to the young woman, Suan. Shang felt like disappearing, not knowing what to say, only hoping God would save him from such an awkward moment.
As the protagonist searched for something to save him, he noticed the small box he had prepared for the singer on the table. He quickly grabbed it and handed it to Shun, asking her to leave since everything was finished, reminding her that their relationship was purely business, with no other intentions.
Irritated, Shun turned her back on him and said she would send the tickets later. The young woman slammed the door without looking at the protagonist, who even offered to accompany her to her car. He ordered his team to send the VIP tickets. The young woman searched her bag for a small perfume bottle, feeling powerless for not having won the protagonist over as she had hoped. But she remembered her master's words. He had given her the perfume to increase her fame, hoping it would make the protagonist fall for her quickly.
3 days later, the Shang concert finally arrived. Clearly, it was she who was excited, enjoying the great view from the stage while playing with the light sticks and soaking in the show. Her father seemed equally entertained, although Shang was the only one who didn't look very comfortable. He remembered perfectly how they had handed out more than 3 VIP tickets and decided to just watch the concert. The atmosphere wasn't bad, but at that moment, he was nervous, silently hoping nothing would go wrong. But as we already know from stories like this, obviously something bad was about to happen. Shun was shining in her big white dress, her hair cascading down her back. At one point, she started crying, overwhelmed by how beautiful the girl was. She knew it was true and even felt like crying herself, but then she noticed something was very wrong. Turning to her beloved, she saw that she too was filled with melancholy. The emotions only intensified when Shen called out, begging for her mother. The atmosphere was heavy with empathy, but Shang could only wish he could meet the person responsible for all of this. Peeking out the window, Shang saw a red thread connected to Shun. He shouted loudly to the girls to step back for a moment and to take care of themselves, but neither of them got the message. This just made the protagonist even angrier. He rushed out, only to find that the thread had disappeared. Suddenly, a thin, delicate hand stroked his chin and called out to him. Another hand grabbed his waist. Then a girl with purple hair whispered in his ear in a slightly seductive way. When Shang increased his energy to push her away, she looked at him threateningly, giving him about 5 seconds to explain what this secret magic was all about. The girl forced a nervous, confused smile, showing surprise at his determination. Shang immediately realized she must be from the Shangmin Palace. She explained that it wasn't exactly like that. Shang pressed, and eventually, the girl admitted she was a witch who needed the energy of other people, and that there were plenty of people around she could take advantage of. A little tired of listening to her, Shang moved forward with his fist raised, but stopped in time to give her a second chance to tell the truth. This time, she swore to be honest. She was from the Shangmin Palace and had sold a perfume to Zum to boost her popularity. This time, Shang asked about it himself, why she hadn't used it herself. The girl said her voice wasn't really fit for singing, and that's how she ended up surrendering to the protagonist, promising to guard him and the old man in exchange for forgiveness. Shang decided to hear her story first before deciding whether she deserved that forgiveness. Now, Shang regained hope of rescuing Qin and Yu. The girl, acting a little strange, indicated the base at Mount Lilang Gong. She told him that if he followed the path forward, he'd find the storage area, and to make sure he didn't get lost, she would guide him. Shang set off immediately. When he reached the cave alone, he was surprised to realize he had been tricked before. Just entering, he was startled by falling rocks, but he refused to give up no matter the cost. Suddenly, he saw some bright lights that looked like they could be a huge treasure. He settled in, trying to absorb energy, but quickly realized it wasn't going to work. Still, his greed made him risk taking everything.
Outside, it was snowing. Shang meditated until he summoned the rain dragon, which immediately devoured the energy and granted him a new, unnamed technique. The dragon roared fiercely, making Shang even stronger. Then he heard another voice and turned furious at being interrupted in his supreme technique. It was King, looking vulnerable and injured. Shang approached, removed the tape from her mouth, and untied her, telling her to leave quickly because the guy was coming. Shang remembered she was no longer technically his sister-in-law, and became even more curious to know if she knew anything about Jin Hu. She explained that she had heard the guy say that Jin Hu wasn't good enough for him. Shang told her that as soon as he got him out of there, she should leave immediately. She stayed quiet while Shang prepared to test his new ability. He aimed and fired in the cave. Outside, the purple-haired girl heard a strange noise. A massive light spread across the forest, leaving only shadows. Shang thought about how he would need to use that power carefully in the future. The place was collapsing, so Shang and King rushed to escape. When they saw the guy enter the hideout, which was now falling apart, the old man tripped on a rock and realized all his medicine had disappeared. But most importantly, he clearly knew who was responsible for everything. Meanwhile, Chum's concert had ended. Both Suan and Xiaomi were starting to come out of their trance, still a little disoriented without Shang's presence. Chum tried to comfort her friend, saying he was probably in the bathroom dealing with stomach issues, but Suan was certain too much time had passed. Then, Shang appeared, battered, carrying King in his arms.
ZB panicked, thinking the girl was dead, but the protagonist reassured her. Shang told them to call an ambulance immediately, and then he would explain the rest of the story. Sukian followed the advice and grabbed her phone while the protagonist used a bit of his power to stabilize Kuroda. Later, Muslin and the others gathered, crying and worried about everything that had happened. Sukian felt proud of Shang for bringing the sisters together, but he was still extremely irritated with Jin Hu. Suddenly, Zhu Pem appeared, aware that Shang was injured. He responded curtly that she didn't need to worry. After asking him to lower his voice, Shang held out his hand, expecting her to hand over the hidden perfume. Chun claimed she didn't know what he was talking about, but Shang threatened her and her reputation to speed things up. With tears in her eyes, she admitted she had used it because of him. Shang ignored her and continued waiting. When he finally got the perfume, he took a good look at it and noticed some spirits emerging, which even startled Zhu Pem. He explained that while the spirits brought luck, they also drained all the vital energy from those around them. Zhu Pem realized, after some time, what she had been spraying all along. When the souls started speaking to her, asking her to be more grateful after everything that they had been through together, Shang acted quickly, grabbing the spirits firmly in his hands. The spirits, struggling, asked who he was. He stared at them challengingly, asking if insignificant souls had the audacity to speak to him like that. Despite his words, the spirits warned that it would be better if he let them go if he knew what was good for him. This only made him angrier.
He crushed them in his hands, ignoring all threats without flinching. Suddenly, one of the souls transformed into a kind of earthworm. Shang shook his hands and warned Shunter to be more careful and not meddle in things that weren't her business, or she'd have to pay a very high price. With nothing else to do, Shang told Shun she could leave now. She thanked him sincerely for the help, but Shang interrupted, saying she couldn't take advantage of him and that he would charge her for the spell she had cast on him. Shun walked back, still furious, seeing Shang as greedy and heartless. She promised she would pay. On her way, she had to stop when she saw two unknown men approaching. The men quickly came up to Shang and asked if he was the one they were looking for. Shang asked who they were. One of them explained they were from the Fang clan and that their master had sent them to find him at a cafe near the hospital. Since Shang didn't know them, he refused to go, saying he had other matters to deal with. One of the men grabbed a phone and asked Shang if he recognized the guy on the screen. It was Jen. Suan was shocked seeing the boy in that state, even in the video. She asked Shang not to worry about him until he got slapped across the face, making Shang clench his fists. He told them to stop fighting, and they agreed. Shang decided to go along with them. When they arrived, they found a long-haired guy who asked Shang to sit down. Young Feng started talking a bit about what he knew of the protagonist, but urged him to get straight to the point. Shang could feel that the guy was weaker than the old man, but he was still a tricky opponent. Feng handed him a gold card, asking him to accept it.
Shang looked confused as the guy explained that he was in a critical situation and just wanted to recover what Shang had taken from his family in exchange for a huge amount of money, including Jin Hu in the deal. Shang explained that he wasn't interested in money and had nothing of theirs to offer. Feng asked if he wasn't worried about his friend. The protagonist simply replied that he had nothing to negotiate with them. Now that he knew where the guy was, he had the means to rescue him. Feng started to get annoyed at Shang's attitude, not wanting to settle things peacefully, and ordered his men to hold him down.
Shang smirked, seeing that there were only two of them. When one raised his hand and displayed his power as a warning to leave him alone, Shang realized what was going on. Feng explained that Shang had stolen his medicines after years of cultivation, and he just wanted them back. Shang understood the situation and saw that he had created unnecessary trouble, since those medicines weren't that useful anyway. He denied taking them and simply walked away, leaving Feng to order his men to handle Xinu. At this point, Shang had found a closer connection between the Shangmin Palace and the Feng family than he had thought. After everything that had happened, he knew he needed to take new measures and hurry to find Xinu, who was likely in serious trouble out there. Shang unknowingly pulled a strand of Feng's hair to use what energy remained to locate his friend, just like he had done before. For now, he could only hope that Jin could hold on a little longer. Meanwhile, the poor guy was lying on the ground, with several creatures trying to suck every last drop of his soul. Even the men who were supposed to escort him felt they should end his life to stop his suffering, until they heard someone behind them. Shang stayed hidden until he could easily knock out the two of them and finally reach his friend. The first thing he did was apologize. Them destroyed all the creatures.
Jin Hu opened his weak eyes and saw Shang, who told him not to speak and to wait for his instructions. Shang supported his friend's arm on his shoulder so Jin Hu could lean on him, but Jin Hu tried to stop him, afraid the old man would arrive at that exact moment. Sure enough, the guy appeared right in Jin Hu's prison, congratulating Shang on his abilities. Shang finally recognized the famous lord of the Shangming mansion, Master Hechan. He realized that the man in front of him was actually a part of himself, which left Shang emotional for being the first person to truly understand him. Luckily for the protagonist, Hechan showed mercy because he wanted to offer collaboration. Even though Shang wasn't completely sure, hurting his friends would have been a betrayal of Shangming Palace. To seal the agreement, the old man explained that the Lorino wouldn't be of any use. Since Shang had damaged his physical body, he couldn't evolve his technique. He just wanted Shang to help him find something to restore everything. Hechan spoke of a legend about celestial creatures like dragons and sea serpents, and how one could harness their power on a large scale rather than just establishing a bond. But the price was high. He wanted to obtain a dragon to use its body, scales, and everything to craft weapons, armor, and even divine artifacts. The reason he had been pursuing them was the rumor that one of them had a dragon. Suddenly, Shang burst into loud laughter, tears streaming down his face at the absurdity. What he had been looking for was right in front of him. The old man seemed to go mad with excitement, lunging at the boy to try to seize the dragon. Shang delivered a single strike to knock him to the ground and another to finish him. With the old man now lifeless, a black snow rose, reminding Shang that his projections were more than anyone could handle. But what he had accomplished was essentially signing his own sentence, making enemies of all the followers of Shangming Palace. Shang considered the threats from them seriously, but then turned his attention back to Jin Hu.
There was no point in explaining everything yet. First, he would take him to the hospital to recover. Jin Hu only thanked Shang for everything, but the boy felt it was really him who should be grateful, now that he knew who his enemies were, though he hadn't seen the full extent of what they were capable of. Not far from his position, two men were approaching Shang. As they advanced, the younger one asked their master when they would act. The man with the talisman explained that it was happening right now. In a matter of seconds, several barriers, magical barriers, trapped Shang inside a kind of capsule, when suddenly a portal opened behind them. A sharp hand shot out, but Shang easily eliminated it. He told the guy to reveal himself so he could forgive him, because if he caught him otherwise, there'd be no mercy. A dark voice laughed loudly, returning only threats as the master continued with a new spell. Suddenly, a purple thread crossed Shang's head, and the old master managed to access the protagonist's consciousness, but then a voice interrupted his plans. That's when Shang encountered Fang's consciousness, personified, alongside a massive dragon that seemed to protect him. The protagonist asked if he had enough, and the guy could only collapse in fear, begging the boy for forgiveness. This was how the master ended up revealing himself to Shang in real life.
While wondering how he had seen a dragon, Shang was direct and cold, asking who had sent him. The guy didn't think it was very important until Shang clarified that he had no choice. The man still seemed reluctant to give up, So he drew a new talisman, reminding Shang that he would be captured along with him in his domain. Shang asked if he was a martial artist. The man denied it, trying to give himself a chance to surrender, claiming a martial artist couldn't lose to a non-martial artist. Shang smirked confidently and even joked that he didn't know martial arts either, before scolding him for not properly researching his opponent. With a single snap of his fingers, Shang broke the barrier around him, frightening the guy even more. He still refused to give up and spun, revealing more plans with the new talisman in hand. He charged at Shang, but Shang simply extended 2 fingers and touched the man's forehead, saying he didn't have the time or energy for a fight. He gave him one last chance to say who had sent him. Unable to move, the man confessed it had been Ball. Shang didn't need anything else, so he told him he could leave and to be careful with the traps he set. When he asked for a moment to give one last piece of advice in exchange for having his life spared, he only mentioned that our boy should watch out for the young Al. Al was there training on punching bags when one of his men reported that Master Chan had failed in his mission. Enraged, Al unleashed his fury, cursing him for failing, and ordered the news to be spread so everyone would know about the fight with the protagonist, leaving the guy in the mess he deserved. Back with his group, the young F couldn't stop asking the protagonist if he was scared, or at least nervous about fighting Yao. Shang just said she was his father's subordinate, so there was no reason to be afraid. Suan carefully prepared him, while Shea crossed her arms and told the kid that overconfidence seemed to be her only weapon in every battle, but it wouldn't always be the solution.
Shang was open to her suggestions, and she said he just needed to follow her so no one would dare get close to him. Both Shang and Suyan let out quiet chuckles at the comment, earning a reprimand from Shi for not understanding what was so funny. Suyan then interrupted them to ask whether Shang had accepted the challenge to blow off steam or for another reason. Shang thought it was a little of both, though mainly it was an opportunity to improve his reputation. Suyan couldn't help but laugh at the thought of how frustrated he and Al would have been if they had heard that. Shang kept joking around until he realized the time, then said goodbye to the girls, promising to return to the stadium soon. Joss was getting impatient since the protagonist was already a minute late. Shang finally appeared, explaining that it was better to be late than to be a disgusting human like some others, in quotes. And here I kind of agreed with him. Shang added that wasn't the real reason for the meeting, and that he wouldn't be of any use if they wasted more time. Without wasting another second, Yao focused all his energy and launched an attack at the protagonist. The crowd around them went wild. She was certain Shang was a dead man after the first punch, but Suyan said she trusted Shang wouldn't let himself get hurt. Shang was completely calm. When the dust cleared, everyone was left unsure of what had actually happened. Shang started mocking the coward who dared challenge him, throwing punch after punch, while others watched confused, not knowing if he had survived. She ran into Suyan's arms, hugging her tightly, impressed by her courage. Meanwhile, Yao kept striking relentlessly, using every second to insult Shang in every possible way while attempting to take revenge for what happened to his friend. Then, suddenly, his fists stopped.
The dust finally cleared, leaving Shang completely unharmed. Everyone thought what they were seeing was impossible, but Shang explained that it wasn't. He was simply the stronger of the two. His fist ignited in red flames, causing Yao to panic and beg for mercy, which he didn't get, being sent flying across the arena. No one in the audience could believe it. Jia Mei started to understand the true strength of the protagonist and expressed confidence that Shang would be the winner. Then Su Yan noticed another guy approaching the center. He seemed to be complaining about the destruction of the place. The protagonist asked who he was, gathering his strength throughout his body. The man introduced himself as the one who would end Shang's life. Shang immediately thought about the resemblance between this guy and the one who had delivered tea before. Taking a risk, he asked if they were brothers with the surname Feng. The guy denied it, but Shang realized he knew Feng well enough and preferred not to treat him like a brother since he was weak. He called him Feng Ning
and the only advice he could give the protagonist was to find a distant place to hide, unless he returned the medicine he had stolen, in which case the fangs might cut him some slack. The protagonist didn't let it bother him. It wasn't the first time he'd received a threat like that. Fang Ning said he could accept Shang's decision and would attack his master when he had the chance. Both of them tried to intimidate each other, releasing internal energy that made everyone else present want to run, even though in reality, they were just scared of what Fang Ning could do. Hearing the other's comments, Fang Ning couldn't resist bragging about his reputation, but Shang remained indifferent, making it clear he felt no fear at all. This irritated Fang Ning even more.
He slammed Shang into the ground with enough force to shatter it, sending pieces flying toward him, but Shang simply picked up the stones without a problem. Bored, Fang Ning, increasingly frustrated, released the snake he had with him, but Shang easily destroyed it, leaving Fang Ning shocked that he really didn't know the boy's capabilities. He had only seen this level in Shang's father, and blamed himself for not investigating the boy enough before confronting him. But now it was too late to back down. Fang Ning wasn't willing to make a fool of himself in front of his peers by abandoning the battle, so he had no choice but to win by any means possible. He concentrated every drop of his energy to strengthen his body, while Shang began to suspect things were about to get complicated. Fang Ning had lost his composure, so Shang prioritized warning the others to get to safety. Suddenly, a huge piece of metal shot through without warning, smashing everything. That's when Rian appeared, commanding silence through the cameras, making the kids nearly soil themselves at the sudden appearance. Shang approached the intimidating man, and Rian extended his hand, demanding King back. He made it clear that if the man wanted to protect the lives of those present, that was what should be done. If King could be returned within 24 hours, neither Shang's beloved Suan nor anyone else would be harmed. To ensure Shang didn't doubt him, the man had already taken the life of one victim. Shang only asked that he keep his word. Haechan explained that even though Shangming Palace wasn't a respected group, they had enough principles to honor their promises. After Haechan said time was running out, Shang turned and ran, while everyone else called for help. Rian now just needed to wait a little longer before finally getting his hands on Ginseng. Now he was desperate, thinking about what to do, knowing he wasn't ready to confront that guy in a fight. He pulled out his phone and called Scarface, asking him to gather all the best medicinal ingredients.
He didn't pay much attention when Scarface suggested he start asking for help too, since he was tired of running around saving lives. Suan knew Shang hadn't come back for hours, but calling him would only make things worse. After thinking for a bit, she remembered a girl and quickly looked her up on her phone, a purple-haired girl from Kyoto. The girl answered, clearly surprised, and Suan asked for her help. That caught the girl off guard, but she agreed to help as long as Suan promised to return the ingredients to the rightful owner, the Lee family. Anger started to rise in Suan because she knew she couldn't keep that promise. The other girl teased her, talking about her current position with her grandmother after being kicked out. The only thing the purple-haired girl could do was advise her to wait for the next life and stop being the burden she had always been. With that, she hung up. Meanwhile, Suan started to lose it, her sanity fraying, and she scolded herself for not being strong enough to defend herself. Zine got worried seeing her cry, but she insisted it was nothing. In fact, she was more concerned that Suan might be hungry or tired. Zine asked her to take care of herself too, trying to cheer her up. Then Xiaomi hugged her tightly, promising to protect her from anything bad, which finally brought a smile to Suan's face. Far away, Shang hadn't stopped practicing and meditating in the middle of the woods in front of a cool waterfall. He tested his new abilities, and everything seemed to be working. The best part came when he heard Jin Hu and Scarface calling him. They appeared with 2 big sacks full of medicinal ingredients, just the amount Shang had requested. He congratulated them and thanked them for doing such a solid job. They explained it was the least they could do for the brother who had protected them so many times.
Now it was up to Shang to see how it would actually work. He carried the 2 sacks and told the guys to stay as far away as possible to avoid stray bullets. They immediately obeyed. Shang waded into the water, set the bags aside, and sat under the waterfall. The first step was to find peace in his body and mind until he became completely still. After his first deep breath, his energy started flowing through his entire body. His plan was to create and refine a golden pill that would boost his power for half an hour, no more than that. Shang pressed his hands together, then extended them, releasing his energy. Soon, the pill appeared in his hands, and he swallowed it immediately. Jin Hu just stared, watching closely to see if Shang had. By the time he finished, a burst of energy shot out, making the 2 guys jump in shock.
That was how the protagonist boosted his powers, and there was no better proof than his white hair and golden eyes. The effect was temporary though. Now he had to hurry to save Suan, Ixmai, and everyone else who was still in trouble. Meanwhile, the others were getting more and more worried, thinking Shang had bailed on the job like a coward. Rian took the opportunity to tease Suan, offering to save her life if she agreed to join him, claiming he had much more to offer. Before he could touch her, Ixmai ran up and cornered him, defending Suan. Suan stepped forward, calling her out for her actions, while Rian let out that mocking laugh, saying he didn't want trouble but had no choice. The only option left was to take the two as sacrifices. Just as he was about to carry out his plan, a voice interrupted the classic villain speech. It was Shang's silhouette revealing himself. Rian asked where Jinx was, and Shang explained that his plans had changed too.
Now, Shang was going after Reen's life. Hearing this, Reen unleashed a talisman, challenging Shang to show what he was capable of. Reen tried to escape with a jump, breaking the ceiling, but Shang chased after him. Reen couldn't believe it. How the heck had Shang learned mental control so fast? And he could feel that Shang's power had jumped to dangerous levels in less than a day. In that moment, Shang hit him, knocking him into the water. Shang stood in the water while Reen recovered, realizing that the protagonist's power was only temporary. Shang felt nervous but kept his composure, continuing to taunt them. They jumped at Shang while Reen promised his friends a party that would turn Shang into minced meat. The insects wrapped around the boy's legs, but Shang managed to shake some of them off before they got too close. That's when he chanced saw an opening, a perfect opportunity, and sent more of his friends, who ended up trapping Shang between their bodies. He-Chan was already celebrating victory, just waiting to see Shang torn apart by his minions. He could hardly wait to return to the Dragon God, a massive artifact, and turn Shang into a puppet. He wanted the entire Swangming sect to be more recognized and to gain the power to conquer anywhere without any obstacles. Finally, as a form of gratitude, he swore to build a huge monument in Shang's name, praising his humble sacrifice for all of them. What Reen had no idea about was that our Shang was chilling under the water, calmly watching the sad scene while mocking the power the villains thought they had. It was a complete disappointment for them. Seeing that the old man had no tricks left up his sleeve, Shang had had enough of this game and decided to take action. Reen thought it was time for his friends to finish Shang off, but suddenly, all the lights among the insects disappeared. Shang stood up as if nothing had happened, calmly saying it was time for him to go home with his beloved.
Shang's golden pill effect was only 30 seconds from running out, and Reen had no idea what had just happened, starting to panic. He remembered he still had a trick up his sleeve. The old man moved his hands, raising the water around him and transforming it into powerful bullets aimed at Shang. The boy didn't even need to lift a finger to defend himself. With only 10 seconds left, Reen had no choice but to try negotiating a deal. But in the final 5 seconds, Shang concentrated his best technique at his fingertips and fired a golden beam just as the pill's effect ended. The overwhelming power weighed down on him, making his legs tremble. Shang knew he couldn't fall. He first had to reach Suan. Then he saw and heard his loyal friends, Jin Hu and Scarface, running toward him, announcing that his beloved was already safe. With that relief, the protagonist let his weakened body give in and fell asleep, unaware of anything else. Sometime later, he began hearing voices and opened his eyes, realizing he was back home. Questions flooded his mind. How had he gotten there? How badly was he hurt? A delicious smell hit him, reminding him of every time Suan had tried to cook for him. Suddenly, his beloved entered the room, welcoming him home. She explained that he had slept a lot and must be starving, so she brought him a soup, this time without the wrong ingredients. Shang sat on the bed and asked her to serve a portion. She ran off to grab the pot, disappearing from the room. Shang then noticed another girl nearby with a strong internal energy. She introduced herself as Jing Mei and asked him not to be nervous. She was just Swan's best friend and meant no harm. Shang explained that the world he lived in forced him to be cautious of everyone, which Jing appreciated, realizing how much he cared for Suan. Jing went on to mention that by the end of the year, a king herb would appear, a special plant that could give a 100-year boost in meditation and cultivation. When Shang asked why she was telling him this, she explained that the Shang family was mobilizing 3 great masters. She admitted she didn't think Shang could handle it alone and proposed a partnership with him to hunt the king herb, which was rumored to already... Shang asked if she had a plan to face the 3 Shang family guys, and Jing explained that she only wanted to avoid trouble with her family, since those immortals could be extremely extremely greedy. Shang considered it for a moment, but then Suan returned to the room, surprised to see everyone getting along. Jing explained that she had just been testing if Shang was worthy of her. Suan then invited everyone to eat and continue their conversation. Suddenly, Shang and Jing's eyes widened in shock and fear as a new presence appeared behind Suan. The old man ignored their questions and expressed his disappointment at seeing how weak and slow the younger generation was. Jing was the first to try attacking him, but he warned them not to underestimate him so easily. She barely got close before he pushed her away with an absurd force, sending her flying. Suan immediately worried, rushing to check if her friend was okay. The protagonist stood up furious and charged at the old man with flames in his hands. The old man defended himself with a shield. Shang's feet involuntarily recoiled, which surprised him, but instead of anger, the old man seemed nostalgic, commenting on how much Shang resembled his father. Despite his youth, Shang was astonished that someone had known his father, but he didn't lower his guard until he understood the old man's intentions. The elder laughed while explaining that although he knew Shang's father, he didn't consider Shang worthy of being his friend. Impatient, Shang demanded to know what he was doing there. The old man pointed to Suan, revealing that he had come to take her. Shang's blood boiled at the thought, swearing he wouldn't let anything happen to her even if he had to give his life to protect her.
The old man noticed that Shang carried the fighting spirit and protective instincts of his father, along with the same determination. He explained that he wasn't asking for permission, not because he didn't trust Shang's abilities, but to help both him and Suan. When things got more dangerous, Shang still refused to let him take Suan. That's when she spoke up, telling Shang that she didn't want to be a burden to him or continue being humiliated by the rest of her family. Shang could already see the great potential in the young girl, so much so that he promised her that with proper training, she could surpass him one day. Despite feeling a heavy weight in his heart, thinking about being away from his beloved, Shang took a moment to reflect. He realized just how much Suan had been through, hurt, injured, crying, suffering in countless ways. Shang wanted to be the one to protect her, to be the man who cared for her. All that was left was to keep training until he was strong enough. Shang looked the old man in the eyes and asked again if he would keep Suan safe. The elder swore he would, stating that she would now be his disciple. On the other hand, he asked Shang to become stronger quickly if he wanted to see her again, as she would be established in Kyoto, where they would meet once more, as if no time had passed. With that, the old man punched Shang in the neck, sending him falling and preventing any pursuit. Suan looked at him sadly, and the elder even teased him, seeing how persistent Shang was in continuing his training. When Shang finally woke up with a start, he yelled loudly, making Jing cover her ears. She told him to focus on what they could do to improve his skills for the future. Shang wasn't in the best mood, but knew she was right, and he promised to get stronger quickly. However, before starting, he asked Jing to tell him more about her family. She agreed, explaining that the Su family was a prominent family in Kyoto, always producing at least one member skilled in martial arts.
One example was Suyu, the most outstanding child of the Suki branch, representing the power of martial arts. Shang realized Suyu was only 5 years older than him, which meant he could potentially surpass him when he reached the same age. Jing thought Shang was a bit audacious for setting such a high goal, but she understood his reasoning. It was possible to reach Suyu's level, though not the legendary or divine power that the elder who took Suan possessed. Shang understood the situation better, started stretching, and tied his hair up, saying it was time to begin training. Jing drifted into thought, and Shang told her to hurry up. A month passed and the day of the Fang family tournament arrived. Everyone was there, talking about the competitors they would watch, and of course there were the usual fake attitudes aimed at our protagonist. Jing and Shang walked through the crowd when they heard a commotion. Some guards were harassing an innocent boy, but the kid with pink hair wouldn't stand for it. The boy took more hits until Shang intervened, holding them off and asking if he was okay. The boy nodded, and even so, Shang confronted the guards, warning them not to forget his name after teaching them a lesson. The
protagonist moved forward with Jing and the boy, who upon realizing who Shang was, declared himself a fan and asked to become his disciple. Shang apologized, explaining that he wasn't a master. Just then, Master Fang appeared, clearly aiming to tease Shang. When Shang greeted everyone enthusiastically, happy not to have seen them for a long time, it quickly became clear that Fang wasn't thrilled to see him there, though part of it was because Shang now had to face him, the father of the boy whose things he had taken. Fang told Shang that if he could defeat him, they could start fresh. Shang happily agreed, treating it like he might make a new friend in no time. Jing, however, scolded him for acting without thinking. Shang didn't understand the issue, so she explained that Fang Gong was a formidable opponent, not someone easy to beat.
Shang calmly replied that facing tough opponents was how one learned, so there was no need to fear. The pink-haired boy encouraged Shang to defeat Fang Gong, and Shang thanked him for the support. Elsewhere, someone alerted Master Fang that Shang had arrived, prompting him to stand and go meet him. Meanwhile, Jin and Shang continued walking among the crowd, who whispered about Shang's reputation. Master Lu cleared a path for them to greet the boy and asked permission to become friends, knowing of Shang's deeds. Jing also seemed impressed by Shang's commanding presence. But as always, trouble couldn't wait long to show up. The biggest problem appeared, Fang Gong himself. He looked annoyed that an elder like Master Lu was present. With just a few words exchanged, Fang Gong launched an attack without warning, using full force on Master Lu, knocking him down. The master couldn't attack someone without announcing a competition, but Fang Gong dismissed it as outdated, claiming there was no need to warn in matters like this. Shang realized Fang Gong's attacks were aimed directly and brutally, clearly fueled by anger. The protagonist tried to intervene but couldn't prevent Fang Gong's second strike, which neutralized Master Lu's abilities. Fang Gong then proclaimed that with his strength, his family could dominate the martial world. Shang interrupted, calmly stating that no matter how much power someone had, people ultimately wouldn't respect them. Fang Gong called Shang foolish for coming alone to face him. Shang explained that he hadn't done anything wrong, but Fang Gong retorted that because of Shang, his son Fang Ling hadn't reached the A level of his power and is now dead. Fang Gong blamed Shang for taking that chance from him.
Shang replied that Ling had sought it first, but he was willing to settle matters, provided Feng Gong honored his son Feng Shang's last wish to forgive everything he accused Master Lu of. Master Lu tried to ask Zhang to stop, but she firmly told the elder that he reassured everyone not to worry about the protagonist, saying he would truly handle the matter. Sir Fang's punch was intercepted effortlessly, and both parties stepped back. Gong unleashed more of his energy to create an internal shield. Even Master Lu had no idea Gong was capable of that, and he thought Shang was in serious trouble. The protagonist casually grabbed a random stick, saying that would be enough to defeat him. Only Jin managed to stay optimistic in that tense moment. Gong seemed irritated by Zhang's teasing and dared to ask if the boy could really defeat him with just a stick. Shang focused his energy at the tip of the stick, aiming directly at the elder. As the energy hit Gong, he began to panic. He felt a pressure compressing his entire body until he collapsed defeated. Feng rushed to his father while the crowd stared, struggling to comprehend who Shang really was. Shang not only gained respect and recognition from more people, but also intensified Feng Shen's resentment. Standing in the center of attention, Zhang asked Feng if he still wanted to continue the fight. Startled, Feng quickly replied that he had been mistaken and no longer wanted any trouble. Zhang reminded him to take care of his father. Feng Shang approached Shang respectfully, addressing him as Master King and accepting his orders. Zhang then requested an apology to Master Lu, which Feng Shang promised to deliver immediately. Meanwhile, Shang stood among the crowd, who murmured in amazement that such a seasoned cultivator who had dominated the world of cultivation for decades had been defeated by a young man of just 20.
In the capital, a servant informed the young Su and the red-haired woman about the result of the duel between Mr. Fang and the protagonist. The woman, confident and arrogant, remarked that reporting the outcome shouldn't
wouldn't even be necessary, as Mr. Fang was expected to be far superior. The servant, unsure of what to say, bowed fearfully and revealed that Mr. Fang had actually lost the battle. The purple-haired woman stood abruptly, incredulous at what she had just heard, asking how Shang could have possibly defeated the master of the dome in such a short time. She calmly expressed that it was not that surprising, remembering Jin Hu, and remarked that he had always been a prodigy with circumstances and luck on his side. She added that the newer generations had even more talent, and it was possible some had already reached the capital. Another young woman agreed, suggesting they send someone to discover the true extent of Shang's power. The protagonist had already been seen by different groups of people gathering around Shang's house, calling him for interviews or asking to be accepted as disciples. At one point, Scarface burst into the protagonist's room, looking a little flustered and irritated by the crowd packed into the space. Sitting beside him, Jang tried to calm him down. Scarface reassured his friend not to worry, saying the crowd would leave soon. Shang returned his attention to Feng Sheng, handing over some books as a sign of respect, along with all the Feng family assets. The busiest commercial streets in the city center, food companies, and pharmaceutical businesses, all already growing steadily. Just as he was about to go, Feng warned him to cut all ties with the Xuanming family.
He added that if Shang was found involved with their shady affairs, he would personally destroy the Feng family. Feng Sheng agreed tearfully, leaving in complete shock. Alone, Shang slumped into his chair, muttering about how arrogant people could be, and Jing responded that it was strange he found it difficult when it seemed so natural for him. Shang hadn't caught that clearly and asked her to repeat it, but Jing diverted the conversation, saying she had something important to share about the King of Herbs, a topic she had mentioned in previous chapters. It seemed the Su family was very aware of the matter and intended to participate in the competition, though they wouldn't send someone as strong as Suyu. Jing wanted to make sure Shang was safe and asked if he feared for his life. Shang immediately responded that she must be joking. For him, this was a unique opportunity to drastically increase his power, and he couldn't miss it, not while the Su family had taken so much from him. He was determined to get the herbs no matter what. Jing was pleased to know she could count on him and that they would start training the next day. Suddenly, someone burst through the window, shouting the protagonist's name. It was the boy from before, the same one who had insisted on being accepted as Shang's disciple, showing that he hadn't given up. They moved to a place somewhat distant, shrouded in mist and ice, where two figures came into view. One of them was facing a polar bear which roared loudly. Zhang lunged at it, striking the beast in the stomach and sending it flying far away. Suddenly, Master Suan asked the young girl to pause. He noticed her pushing herself too hard. While her effort was impressive, he sometimes feared it could backfire.
Encouraging her, he said she was progressing very quickly, but for Suan, it still wasn't enough. With her current level, she couldn't yet keep pace with her beloved protagonist. The old master smiled, understanding he couldn't convince her otherwise. It was time to move on. She followed energetically, ready to keep improving, eager for the next big leap. Soon, the pink-haired boy appeared alongside the protagonist. He had previously insisted on becoming Shang's disciple and now could finally express his gratitude for the privilege. Excitedly, he proclaimed that the protagonist was like a second father to him and vowed to follow every instruction. The boy explained that while his strength wasn't significant, his skill in insulting others was formidable. If anyone dared offend Shang, he would harshly criticize them. Jing was perplexed, convinced Shang's own power was more than enough, making such tactics unnecessary. Shang called the boy's attention, ending his discussion with Jing, and suggesting he aimed to join one of the most famous groups, leveraging his reputation and talent. But the boy aimed even higher, declaring he wanted to become the elder brother of his own clan someday. In his excitement, he accidentally bumped into Jing, but fortunately, she had already arrived. She descended first, observing her surroundings with delight, followed by the boys. Jing was mesmerized by the beautiful area, ideal for cultivating supreme medicinal herbs. Then, three elders appeared, excited to finally meet the talented Shang, about whom so much had been said. Shang showed proper respect as he greeted them.
Jing intervened to point out that Shang was approaching the level of separation of emanation. Suddenly, a new presence arrived, young Suyu. He expressed his annoyance at Shang, claiming she was exaggerating. According to him, the plan could reach an even higher level than she suggested. Suyu began reciting the meaning of gold in comparison to eternity, concentrating his power and smashing a nearby rock to demonstrate his full capability. The elders applauded his strength, deeming him worthy of the Su family. As Jing prepared to defend her previous statement about Shang, the protagonist moved forward, destroying a massive mountain far from his position. He explained that for him, eternity meant exactly this. The elders were left speechless at the demonstration. Suyu clicked his tongue in irritation, then pointed threateningly at Shang, warning him about overestimating his luck. He claimed Shang's greed for the herbs would be useless, though he was certain the protagonist could still achieve it. Shang, smiling, told them to save that debate for the end, when the true winner would finally be decided. The elders looked increasingly concerned about the competition between the two boys, especially fearing potential interference from the Su family, but the protagonist reassured them, saying there was no need to worry about him. Shang reminded everyone to take care of themselves. Chang approached him, voicing her concern that the Su family wouldn't be understanding and might interfere with the elders. The protagonist tried to calm her, but she remained thoughtful. At that moment, Xiao appeared, proudly holding 2 geese in his hands. He announced that the hunt had been successful and couldn't resist showing off his cooking skills. The elders immediately recognized the quality of the birds and began suggesting additional ingredients to create a dish that everyone could enjoy. As the group hurried to eat, the scene shifted to where Xiao was waiting. Xiao insisted he focus on the medicinal herbs and on receiving the rewards he had promised, expressing her frustration at his lack of seriousness.
Once Shang ended the call, Suyu approached, somewhat irritated, thanking him for ignoring the warning that his nephew wasn't reliable for this task. Xiao realized her mistake, but could do nothing but endure Suyu's reaction. Suyu decided it would be better if he handled things personally. He immediately ordered his butler to prepare his luggage for departure that very day. He also commanded his personal servant to pack his belongings for the night, as he would personally oversee the protagonist's mission. The servant tried to warn him not to act without his aunt's approval, but Suyu didn't hesitate to strike the man, demanding obedience and secrecy. This mission was crucial to obtain the herb and prove himself within the Su family. Meanwhile, Shang's apprentice practiced postures with the elders, who helped correct his form. The protagonist rested, satisfied after a hearty dinner. Xiao managed to destroy a log without touching it, but their moment of triumph was interrupted when Shang praised him, only to notice Suyu seemingly ready to attack Xiao. Now, Shang faced Suyu's assault head-on. Suyu prepared to unleash his power again. Jing, worried, asked the protagonist if he had been hurt, to which he whispered that he was only pretending to make his opponents feel safe. In his mind, he already recognized the side effects of the latest forced updates starting to show. Suyu, acting arrogantly, mentioned that his aunt had warned him about Shang. Initially, he thought Shang was a prodigy, but after this incident, he began seeing him as just another opponent. Suyu then demanded that Shang hand over whatever the Su family wanted, claiming that it would spare his life. Jing, ignoring the protagonist, stepped forward. Suyu was surprised by her courage, wondering if she was truly acting independently rather than as a tool for Shang. He seemed pleased with her reaction, and she began questioning whether it would be wiser to use Shang as a human shield.
Suyu laughed, acknowledging that Jing understood the situation well and agreed to continue listening. Jing explained that once they faced the King of Medicine, a massive change in the heavens and earth would occur. She asked who was willing to risk their life in such a dangerous journey. Suyu reflected, pondering if it would be smarter to use Shang's life as leverage. The tension rose, with Jing watching the situation unfold, clearly displeased. Suyu then moved closer to Jing, suggesting they discuss the matter further when the King of Medicine was in front of them. Jing tried to respond calmly, though she was visibly uncomfortable. Suyu decided to leave for the time being, agreed to follow her advice, and set off early the next day. He also mentioned that the older masters of the Shang family were too aged to participate actively, implying the young heroes would have to shoulder the challenge themselves. They would leave the group at the camp while waiting for their victory. Zhang, visibly irritated by the situation, said goodbye to Suyu. As soon as he disappeared, she let out her frustration, punching the air and complaining about his audacity, claiming he wouldn't even have the courage to look
look at himself in a mirror. Shang apologized for dragging her into his problems, but Zhang reassured him that she could handle it and quickly helped him get up from the ground. She began explaining part of her plan for the next day, detailing where they would enter the forest and where Shang would need to find a new opportunity to escape. Shang thanked her for her kindness and concern, but at the same time acknowledged that the King of Medicine plant was too tempting, and so was the desire to live with Suan by his side. She asked if he really believed he could become the King of Medicine. Shang calmly replied that life was practically unpredictable. Zhang then expressed her indifference, as long as Shang didn't drag her along against her will. Suddenly, Shang seemed to activate some power. Jing, surprised, asked if he had used the spirit gathering ability. The protagonist revealed that shortly after arriving at the forest, he had mastered the skill with his disciple, allowing him to heal injuries and face second-tier masters without trouble. He then asked Jing if she thought they would stand a chance against them now. Jing responded that he should have told her earlier and admitted she preferred outsmarting the opponents rather than deceiving their own group. The next day, Sudi appeared, announcing that their target was the 1,000-year-old King of Medicine and that it was time to honor their family's name. After a flood of information, he noticed Shang at his side and asked why he was there. Shang remembered he had been chosen as a human shield, so he had to stay composed with the others. Sugi used some of his own reasoning and agreed with the proposal, though the others doubted Shang's intentions, claiming he was deliberately interfering. As tensions rose as they moved forward, Sugi warned them that they were less than a meter from the spirit of fire and to stay alert. Then, a dense fog rolled in, heightening Shang's tension. Everyone struggled to see clearly. Sugi ordered that no one act rashly or get caught up in the dangers that might descend from above. Then, a figure emerged, seemingly female, observing everyone and declaring that no one would obtain the herbs or see through the fog. Shang's eyes glowed as he recalled the old legend. The true dragon eye could pierce illusions and see everything. Realizing that the legend was true in his own blood, he understood he had an advantage over the others while the fog persisted. Determined, he decided to seize a key opportunity in the group. Sugi, following his master Su's guidance, instructed everyone to. Now, Shang could see the path clearly and sense the dangers lurking in the forest. Sugi warned everyone to stay alert to avoid any missteps. While the group was focused on safety, Sugi himself slipped and fell in a comical way, spreading mud everywhere.
The group panicked, asking if he was okay. He tried to calm them, claiming he had just slipped in the mud, but deep down, he felt as if someone had actually kicked him. With the dense fog, he couldn't be sure. Amidst this strange situation, the master suggested they go help Sugi, but Jing intervened, telling everyone to stop and question the wisdom of risking another life without knowing what they were facing. The enemy could move freely within the fog and had already knocked down Sugi. Both Master Zhou and Master Wang agreed with Jing's reasoning. Sugi, frustrated, demanded that whoever kicked him reveal themselves. He continued shouting until he seemed to notice Shang, pointing at him as the supposed traitor just as the snow began to clear. Sugi questioned Shang's sanity, escalating the tension. Shang, fearing the situation might spiral out of control, readied himself to retaliate. He unleashed his power towards Sugi, but Jing immediately stepped in, ordering him to stop, interrupting the attack. Master Zhao, surprised, remarked that Jing had learned a signature technique of the Shang family. Jing confirmed his observation, while a bewildered Sugi asked if she intended to protect Shang. Suddenly, a spiraling fire erupted, drawing everyone's attention. They all recognized it as a high-quality fire herb. Jing confirmed the herb's identity, but hadn't realized it was of such exceptional quality. This fire herb was similar to Shang's own cultivation ability. It could not only boost someone's strength, but even revive an ordinary person, turning them into a treasure. Amid the commotion, a scream echoed. Master Zhu had apparently been pierced by Suji's attack. Suji, dismissive, claimed he had heard that to neutralize the spiraling fire, a sacrifice was required. Mockingly, he asked Master Zhu if he was upset, then called Master Wan to handle him. As Suji cleaned his hand, Jing whispered to Shang, urging him to leave immediately. Shang, surprised, asked why. Jing explained that the danger wasn't Suji or the masters, it was the fire spiral. If it wasn't activated properly,
the entire forest could be reduced to ashes. Master Wan informed Suji that the fire seemed to be burning hotter than ever. Initially, Suji couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he soon realized that the spirit herb had reacted to his previous plan. He recalled the idea of using Shang as a sacrifice and turned to him with a malicious look. Shang, shocked, realized he was in immediate danger. Shang pointed at himself, confused, while Jing shouted at Suji, warning him not to create illusions. Suddenly, Suji unleashed his power, immobilizing Jing and keeping her from approaching. He sneered, promising she would regret defying him. Jing, undeterred, responded with fearless determination. Arrogantly, Suji declared that once he absorbed the spirit herb and reached level A, he would have the strength to claim Jing as his own. Turning to Master Wan, he ordered him to capture Shang immediately. Yet Shang, still engaged with Suji, noticed the man hadn't even paused to breathe after executing several movements, making him realize how difficult this fight would be. In a quiet whisper, Shang offered Master Wan a deal, revealing his understanding of Suji's cruelty and how he would pursue them relentlessly if successful. Master Wan agreed.
Shang explained that if Huan promised to protect Jing, he would personally face the fire spiral alone. Jing, witnessing the plan unfold, shouted in alarm at Shang, demanding to know his intentions. Master Huan suggested that even if Shang couldn't defeat Sungji alone, he and Jing could escape together. Shang accepted the plan and charged straight into the fire spiral. Jing screamed in terror, seeing the flames engulfing the area, but suddenly the flames vanished, leaving only a gaping hole in the ground and a completely devastated landscape. Panic gripped Jing as she could not see Shang anywhere. Between sobs, she whispered that they were lost, knowing that the fire spiral could consume even the air and that no human should be there unprotected. A deep, mocking voice broke through the chaos, remarking that it would have been better if Shang had perished in the flames. Sungji, confident, explained that the spirit herb would inevitably be his, and fewer survivors meant fewer people to share the reward. He continued, noting that Master Huan acted as a mentor for him, and he was certain of receiving his due reward. Jing, seeing Shang's life on the line, agreed to cooperate, focusing only on keeping him safe. Surprised, Sungji seemed indifferent, commenting that he could forgive her life for now. Meanwhile, Jing and Huan exchanged discreet words, Jing questioning what she had witnessed. Huan revealed that Shang and he had agreed on a plan that would ensure their survival. Shang, confident in his choice, announced that he would head into the heart of the fire vortex to claim the spirit herb.
The shock on Jing's face was unmistakable, and she questioned Huan about the seriousness of Shang's resolve. Jing remained silent for a moment, reflecting, fully convinced that the real battle was about to begin. This time, Sugi was about to reveal his true power. Master Wang attempted to warn him against using it, but Sugi ignored the advice. Focusing his magic, he targeted Shang, the only one who had forced him to utilize his full strength, launching a devastating attack that rippled through the forest. Sugi's attack took the form of a dragon's claw, but Shang managed to dodge it just in time, though not without consequence. A deep slash appeared across his arm. Suddenly, he asked Master Wang whether the technique was an ancestral secret of the Su family. The master shook his head, explaining that such magic required sacrificing one's own flesh, and the longer it was used, the greater the damage to the body. He added that practitioners of this technique often ended up dead, and the aftermath could be so horrifying that it would leave anyone witnessing it, including Shang, with a profound sense of guilt, no matter the battle's outcome. Shang, undeterred, summoned a power called the Nameless Fist, invoking the soul of the dragon within him and channeling all his remaining energy. Suddenly, a new voice rang out in the battlefield. It was Suyu. He commanded both sides to halt immediately. Shang, surprised, asked why the fight needed to stop when Sugi clearly intended to hurt him. Suyu explained that Sugi had already been given his lesson and that continuing the fight was unnecessary.
Shang cheekily replied that he should still seek revenge for his friend whose tofu dish Sugi had stolen, hinting at more grim matters that had almost occurred, only prevented by Master Huan's intervention. Suyu agreed to provide both sides with some medicinal herbs as compensation. The conversation turned deeper as Shang expressed his doubts about the ethics of the Su family, particularly criticizing their apparent lack of care and sensitivity despite their power. Suyu, realizing Shang was trying to understand why Sugi had been sent, admitted honestly that there was no deeper scheme. Sugi had simply acted on the family's priorities.
Shang reflected on this, realizing that the Su family might not truly value their main lineage, caring only about power, which could allow anyone to infiltrate if they were strong enough. Suyu added a mysterious twist. He shared a prediction from a master about an immortal whose awakening could activate the Su family's ancestral blood, elevating them to new heights. Shang remained skeptical of such miraculous prophecies, yet the words lingered in his mind. Before leaving, Suyu picked up Suji and turned to Shang one last time, reminding him of his promise to meet again in Kyoto in a year and a half. He even gave Shang part of his clothing, a gesture meant to help him overcome his shame. After Suyu and Suji departed, Shang dressed in the gifted garments and let out a heavy sigh, reflecting on the recent events. Jing approached, tears in her eyes, and hugged him tightly, expressing all her concern. Shang reassured her that he would no longer cause her worry. Jing then asked whether he treated Zan the same way. Irritated, Shang pulled away and exclaimed that the Shang family also coveted what the Su family sought. Jing smiled, and Shang nervously affirmed that he would not let past matters hold him back. Shang clarified that he had only been joking and would never harm his one and only friend, Zan. He mentioned that now, with matters settled, he was free to act as he pleased. Soon after, Shang's disciple ran up to them, taking the opportunity to bid farewell to Jing, hoping fate would allow them to meet again. After Shang departed, Jing grew serious and called the three masters over to discuss her updated opinion of King Shang. The masters shared their impressions of his power, suggesting that there were even more reasons to eliminate him quickly. Jing, however, admitted that she felt something for Shang, acknowledging the dilemmas the future might bring, but affirmed that the family always came first, even if it meant opposing her brother or her mother. As night fell, Xiao and Shang debated whether to head home to rest after the long day. At that moment, Xiao received a seemingly urgent call.
Initially annoyed, Shang immediately showed concern, sensing the importance of the matter. After the call ended, Xiao informed Shang that he could use Dai Tian to get around, but Shang learned that everything had burned in the previous accident. Intrigued, he asked what had happened and if Xiao needed any help. Xiao brushed it off as trivial at first. Jing, however, grabbed Xiao's hands, insisting on knowing the truth. Relenting, Xiao began recounting the story of his and his sister's past, starting with the day they lost their parents in a tragic accident when they were very young. Though the driver faced legal consequences, the siblings were left with nothing. The aftermath left deep scars, shaping Xiao's childhood. To survive, he had to work 5 jobs from a young age, all to fund his sister Shin's education, as she was constantly bullied at school. Sadly, the teachers did nothing to intervene, and instead defamed the siblings. After sharing his story, Xiao asked Shang whether he considered his own life meaningful. As an orphan who understood loneliness firsthand, Xiao expressed his willingness to take responsibility for both siblings. Meanwhile, in the icy desert, Suan forged her way through the glacial rocks. Her mentor observed her, commenting that she was exactly the person he had been searching for. Seeing her puzzled expression, he told her that she would understand in time. He also mentioned that the Arctic desert would likely be the final stop on her journey. Suan, with a hint of sadness, asked if he would not be with her anymore. The old man responded playfully, comparing himself to a comet, destined to leave the world by her hands. He praised the girl for her rapid progress, noting that she had become his disciple in just a few months. Then he challenged her to attack him with everything she had. Shocked, she asked if he was serious. When he confirmed he wasn't joking, she warned that if they wanted to return to the city quickly, she wouldn't hold back in combat. But someone was watching them from a distance. Suddenly, several shots were fired in their direction by a group of pirates.
On quick to feet, Suan maneuvered to dodge the bullets and counterattack.
In a critical moment, when a bullet threatened her master, he calmly responded that this was the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his skills. In the blink of an eye, a massive claw materialized from the old man, striking the pirate ship and sinking it, sending the enemies flying into the air. With a serious expression, the master commented that certain improper desires should never arise, nor should they insist on showing off, highlighting the depth of his true power. Before they could continue, a voice interrupted. It was the pirate captain clinging to the edge of the ice platform, mocking them. He sarcastically asked if this man was truly the #1 in the world, the emperor ruling all of humanity. Suan grabbed him by the collar, demanding he apologize to her master. The pirate hesitated, but influenced by her presence and her striking beauty, he changed his mind. With a romantic flair, he apologized and even suggested she copy him again. Disgusted, Suan pushed him away with a swift kick while her master watched, clearly amused, imagining how Shang might feel during his own training. Meanwhile, back with Shang, he sat meditating outdoors, attempting to sense his new power. After an hour of effort, he yelled in frustration. Despite refining his abilities relentlessly ever since consuming that supreme herb, nothing seemed to work. Countless thoughts crowded his mind, and dark circles formed beneath his eyes from days of sleepless training, all in pursuit of becoming stronger. Shang and Master Feng Wang were traveling by plane. The master apologized to Shang, explaining that his son had always been impulsive, often trying to control situations, which had forced the father into extreme measures. He admitted it was his fault, but Shang calmly replied that it wasn't entirely so. The chaos had been caused by the whims of the Abyss Mansion, which had ensnared his son. A young lady beside Shang asked if he was also heading to Linfen.
Shang confirmed. Just as he was about to introduce himself, his bodyguard quickly interrupted, reminding him not to speak to strangers by the orders of his lord. The girl insisted that Shang didn't seem like a bad person. The blonde bodyguard warned that appearances could be deceiving. The master intervened, noting that if Shang were truly evil, the young lady wouldn't still be alive. Impressed, she silently reflected on his words. Hearing this, the young lady was astonished at how easily the master deduced it. Shang whispered to Master Gong about what he had seen, and in response, the master informed him that the leader of the Abyss Mansion was about to depart, with his disciples preparing a grand gift, a highly potent elixir. Shang remarked that the Abyss Mansion was truly dangerous. The young lady reminded Shang to get ready properly. He nodded in agreement, introducing himself politely. Before they could continue, Master Gong interrupted, asking if she was from the Shen family. She confirmed, which visibly worried the master. Shang quickly asked what was happening. Master Gong shared a somber story. The family had once been prosperous, but poor investments years ago forced them to sell most of their assets. Since then, they had lived as an ordinary family. The commander explained that this made her mission in Linen even more critical. Shang advised that they not dwell on it, warning that the Abyss Mansion was ruthless. If she valued her life, it would be better not to attract their attention. The young lady remained silent, and the master quietly asked Shang if he planned to help her. Shang simply replied that he had come to relax, not to act as a savior, and that family matters were complicated, best avoided. Changing the topic, he asked if there was anyone interesting in Linen.
The master, excited, assured him he would enjoy the place. Soon, Shang arrived in the city, his eyes lit up, seeing the high-quality herbs. Curious, he asked the master where he had obtained so much information. The master explained that during his training to reach his current level, the information had come to him naturally, without the need to search. Shang moved toward one of the market stalls, pointing out everything he wanted to buy. The stall owner reminded him of the rules. Customers must verify their assets, with at least $1 million in a bank account with minimal interest. Shang casually slid his black card and handed it to the stall owner. She confirmed that he had far more than $1 million. Feeling embarrassed for not recognizing him earlier, she handed over a bag with all the items he had requested, apologizing for the previous inconvenience. Shang assured her it was fine and asked her to inform him if any new items arrived. She promised she would. Suddenly, someone arrived asking for the store owner. The woman hurried to serve Mr. Shaw, who announced he would buy everything in the shop.
including what Shang already had in his hands. The woman informed him that the items had already been paid for, but Mr. Shaw offered more than 10 times Shang's payment, ordering that everything be brought to him immediately. The master approached Shang, asking if he wanted him to handle the matter. Shang shook his head, determined to do it himself. He stepped forward to face Mr. Shaw directly, making it clear that what he had purchased was his, and no one else could lay claim to it. However, Mr. Shaw threatened, saying it was either the herbs or Shang's life. The master emitted a dark aura, leaving Mr. Shaw visibly alarmed. His companion whispered that this man was a master of the Kinder art. Mr. Shaw then ordered his men to quickly find Mr. Jin to assert his authority. One young man with glasses muttered that Mr. Shaw was willing to pay $1 billion, to which Shang replied that it would be money very well spent. Mr. Shaw then appeared friendly, claiming it had all been a misunderstanding, and announced that that night he would hold an auction at the underground bank outside the city, inviting Shang and Master Gong to attend. Master Sugir advised Shang to refuse, warning of Mr. Shaw's ill intentions, but Shang decided to accept and shook his hand. Shaw thought he had won, confident that Shang would soon lose his life for daring to oppose him. When night fell, the city was fully illuminated. Mr. Gong and Shang arrived at the auction site and were given masks to wear, which Shang didn't understand. Master Gong explained that many important figures in this house preferred to maintain a low profile while remaining relaxed. Still, Shang was curious why they had been given wolf masks. Once the guests were seated, the auction host took the stage, greeting everyone and present the first item, a Chain Chang Snowling Zero. Whether for martial arts or medicine, it was of the highest quality. The bidding started at 5 million.
Quickly, the offers escalated, reaching 6 million. Then someone offered a 5 billion in an instant. Shane glanced at Gong, curious whether he should start bidding, though Gong had already been watching him from the start. Finally, the last bidder raised their hand, offering 6 billion. The auction ended as it began, with a man wearing a Zorro mask winning the first lot. The hostess smiled for reasons that seemed dubious. Once all the doors were closed, the audience was startled. She advised Shang to remain alert, apologizing for the scare, and explaining that the next item was extremely important and that no interruptions should be allowed. 2 men pulled back the curtains, revealing a sword shrouded in a dark aura. The hostess explained that it was a bronze sword found in the Shanghai Mountains, now possessing a suspicious aura. They needed to acquire it to later combine their strength and contain its power, ensuring it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. The auction continued, and when the man in the Zorro mask reached 3 billion, he raised his hand, offering an additional billion, which angered Mr. Shah. Shang immediately jumped in with 8 billion and won the sword. Wasting no time, he leapt from his seat and went straight to the sword, holding it with care. But then, the energies escaping from its crystalline prison possessed Mr. Shah. He shattered the crystal and turned to the audience, shouting that no one would leave Lavu. Terrified, people leapt from their seats, while Gong gripped the tip of his sword trying to stop him. Shang suddenly slapped Mr. Shah, making him drop the blade. Gong was confused by Shang's action, and Shang told him to look at his hand.
The energy from the sword had already contaminated a large part of him. Just as Mr. Shaw reached for the sword again, Shang flung it upward to grab it first. Master Gong stood beside him, witnessing Shang's bold action, realizing the sword's corruption had reached a critical point. Suddenly, Shang's eyes turned white. In his mind, the sword's curse prepared to consume him, but Shang wasn't afraid. Calmly, he spoke to the curse, telling it he had been waiting for this encounter. The curse was stunned. It couldn't comprehend the vast knowledge Shang possessed. As Shang held the sword by its hilt, he pressed his mind against the curse, asking it what it was doing there. The curse tried to protest that Shang's level was far too low, but he simply told it to believe what his eyes showed and promised to explain everything if it wanted to survive. Outside, Master Gong shook Mr. Shaw desperately, trying to free Shang. Suddenly, Shang rose as if nothing had happened. Both men were stunned. They couldn't believe Shang was unharmed. Shang played lightly with the sword in his hands, remarking that he'd only had a brief conversation with the entity trapped inside. Nothing special, he said. Suddenly, a sharp dagger grazed his head, alerting him. Cascades of blades rained toward him, but with ease, he dodged them all. A man appeared, applauding Shang's incredible skill, though he quickly warned that Shang would soon face someone far stronger. Mid-sentence, the man froze, recognizing Master Gong.
Gong. Shang, the great King Shang, caused him to sweat in fear.
Xiao rushed forward to intervene. He was swiftly sent flying. Mr. Yang bowed respectfully to Master Gong, and Shang apologized on behalf of Mr. Xiao, explaining that neither he nor Mr. Gang had known the young man who had just arrived in the city. Shang didn't care much. His priority was sealing the sword so the soul within could be reborn. Fortunately, Mr. Yang managed the seal perfectly, but when Shang handed him the sword, he noticed the familiar scent of Shang's perfume. It was linked to Shang's fan. Suddenly, Mr. Yang became possessed by the sword's soul, which rejoiced at finding such a powerful host. Master Gong readied himself to confront Mr. Yang, but before he could strike, Shang stepped forward and held the sword, intercepting the attack. Shang held the sword with just 2 fingers, visibly irritated that the spirit had broken its promise. He faced it calmly, explaining that it would now have to follow stricter rules. Mr. Yang's body began to tremble as the spirit protested, attempting an apology, but Shang didn't entertain its pleas. The spirit began begging for forgiveness, realizing Shang wasn't amused by its games, yet Shang ignored it entirely and shattered the sword into thousands of pieces, sealing its fate. Later, Master Gong told Shang that the true mastermind behind everything might be the Dark Palace. Shang admitted he had already suspected this, recognizing the perfume of those men.
He asked Gong if he remembered the 2 people on the plane, explaining that the palace was extending its influence and putting more people in danger. Gong's gaze turned serious as he asked Shang if he was truly worried about others. Shang affirmed that it was impossible to ignore such a threat. A metallic sound suddenly echoed through the room. Master Gong pointed behind Shang, indicating that the sword had somehow reformed itself. Shang paused, thinking that perhaps by breaking it, he had freed its demons and was now ready to wield its true power. Confident, he decided to take it with him, promising to share the victory with Gong if they could defeat the Dark Palace together. In another scene, a young girl with pink hair, Shenjin Man, approached the master, asking him to read her fortune in hopes of learning about her family's future. Shang held her hand, telling her that he saw a promising life for at least 30 more years, but only if she made a small sacrifice. Confused at first, the girl listened as the master explained that only a single drop of blood was needed. Accepting this, Shenjin Man bowed respectfully, thanking him for his kindness. The master then directed her to the room on the left. When her bodyguard tried to follow, the master intervened with a single gesture, preventing him from accompanying her, as he wasn't qualified to be near her. Nearby, several men whispered about the master's incredible skill, offering such powerful services for just 5 years. Meanwhile, Shang and Master Gong had just arrived, although Shang couldn't understand why people were paying attention to the gossip, as the clientele was anything but small. Gong sighed, seeing it was unfortunate, but they had no choice but to wait in line. Shang agreed, noting that alarming anyone wouldn't be wise. 2 hours later, it was finally Shang's turn. The master examined his hand, explaining that Shang would experience great fortune, but only if he stayed in the temple to purify his soul, lest disaster strike. Shang teased the man, questioning the certainty of his prediction.
The master insisted that faith was incredibly powerful. Shang then proposed that the master read his own hand first, which confused him. Shang explained that he was about to face a great disaster. Alarmed, the master realized Shang's true identity. Once confirmed, the old man stood abruptly, declaring that he had nothing to do with the monastery. Instead, he would guide Shang to the true masterminds behind the threats. Nearby, whispers carried through the air, with some people claiming that everything the master said came true, but none of it mattered much to Shang, who was already growing impatient after walking for an hour. Master Gong leaned in and whispered a warning. They had to be cautious, as the Dark Palace could be extremely cunning. Shang took the warning seriously, yet as they reached the mountains, he began to believe it couldn't be a trap. Meanwhile, a mysterious old master, introducing himself with a confident air, seemed certain that the boy, Shang, was completely ignorant. But as they took another step, the entire environment shifted, becoming ominous and foreboding. The old master conjured a protective formation that trapped everyone in its grip.
Gong immediately positioned himself in front of Shang, attempting to shield him, while the old master began amassing his power, ready to demonstrate the full might of the Dark Palace. He declared that anyone he overcame would be honored as a great elder. Gong, undeterred, also began to release his power, confident that this enemy was no real threat. When one of Gong's attacks hit, nothing happened. The insects summoned by the old master were completely unaffected. Then it was the old master's turn.
With a snap, he unleashed a massive wave, 100 feet wide, that pinned Gong's arm. He sneered, claiming that Gong's end had come. Gong struggled, unable to free himself. Quickly, Shang intervened with a precise, clean strike, cutting through the wave of insects. He apologized as he shielded Gong from the lingering danger. Gong, recognizing Shang's skill, expressed his gratitude. His admiration didn't go unnoticed by the old master, who was shocked at the boy's knowledge and capabilities. The old master declared that nothing Shang did would matter now. Within his domain, he was invincible. Even immortal powers couldn't harm him in his current state. Shang, however, moved with astonishing agility, delivering a flawless cut that annihilated the entire wave of insects. The old master froze, stunned at Shang's prowess. Shang calmly stated that he had to acknowledge the fact that these creatures were no ordinary pests. If he wanted to understand why the Dark Palace had survived for so many years, it was thanks to these very creatures. The old master laughed loudly, summoning more insects and boasting about the palace's legacy that had endured for generations. What had begun as a simple stronghold had now grown to include a wide variety of venomous creatures, and there were even higher-ranked individuals with far greater power. Shang, unbothered, walked slowly toward the old master and questioned whether he wasn't tired of maintaining a legacy built on a few broken creatures that only poison the environment. Strangely, the closer Shang got, the more the old master trembled, pleading for him to stay away. Shang reminded him of his own words. Today was the day the master would finally face his reckoning.
The old master launched an even more massive attack, insisting that the only one truly afraid there was the protagonist. It was true that Shang had frozen for a brief moment, but being momentarily stunned was very different from being scared. The old master clearly knew the sword Shang possessed and understood that it could seriously harm him. Confidently, he attempted to escape the confrontation while insisting he wasn't afraid, hoping his attack would delay Shang. In the blink of an eye, Shang freed himself from the swarm of insects and ended the life of the old man, his first enemy defeated. Shang quickly checked on Master Gong, who assured him not to worry, though he himself should be the one apologizing for not being able to assist earlier. Shang brushed it off, saying that what mattered was that Gong was safe. Gong accepted the words with humility, admitting some lingering embarrassment. But there was no time to return to calm. A loud scream echoed through the mountains, immediately putting Gong and Shang on high alert. They traced the sound to a vast, dark chamber deep within the mountains. The room was pitch black, filled only with voices pleading for mercy. A blonde woman dressed in dark garments declared that it was impossible, grabbing a young blue-haired girl by the face and hurling a long way away. The girl trembled, tears streaming, realizing she might be next. Before the blonde could continue, her subordinates appeared behind her, signaling that the mountain's protective formation had sent a warning. The woman hurriedly ordered everyone to evacuate, urging them to check on the disturbance. But Shang waved it off, stating that it wasn't necessary. Everyone present was already stunned by the intruder, about to ruin their plans.
The blonde seemed to recognize Shang as well, but her shock was not at his presence. It was that she had thought she had eliminated him during the auction. The blonde began to channel her powers, expressing her gratitude for having allowed Shang to enjoy his previous victories firsthand. She ordered her subordinates to set up a formation to avenge the old master. Shang wasted no time, drawing his sword and cutting down her men with precision. Panic began to set in on the blonde. In a desperate move, she drew a hidden dagger from her clothing and stabbed herself, simultaneously summoning a dark, luminous power high above her head. Something massive seemed to emerge, a statue-like figure forming from the shadows. As the surrounding stones shattered, a green-hued body revealed itself, stretching and inhaling the fresh air after a long time. The creature demanded that its guards serve it immediately, exuding a terrifying aura of awakening power. They brought in fresh young fighters for snacks when his gaze fell on the area. He didn't seem to be in a good mood. Not that it mattered, because he quickly realized who was responsible for getting rid of his men. Shang didn't hesitate to admit that everything he was doing was about purging the place. Lev planted his sword to defend himself against the beast that had launched the first attack, or so he thought. The creature ended up behind him, mocking him for being too slow. When it launched a new attack, Shang barely managed to defend himself, the beast's power sending him flying into a wall and throwing off his balance for a moment. After taking a second to think, he opened his eyes and they were glowing, showing that he had just awakened another of his talents. The first thing he did was dodge and defend with his sword, enduring the wild, frenzied attacks of the creature, which even congratulated him for being the first to dodge one of his strikes. Shang knew he was facing a strong, fast opponent who had managed to knock him down twice in a row without giving him a chance to respond.
So he set his sword aside and activated the golden body of the true dragon. He knew the state would only last a few minutes, but it was better than nothing. The creature quickly recognized that the boy had true dragon blood and couldn't help licking its lips, thinking he'd make a very nutritious snack it couldn't waste. This time, the protagonist returned the attack, daring it to strike back with just a punch, surprising the creature. Though it was faster, it still couldn't destabilize him enough to knock him down. Keeping his distance, he watched the beast slowly approach as he recovered his energy. Knowing he was in trouble after spending so much energy getting there, he came up with an idea. But first, he had to figure out how to rescue Jim and the others. Things were about to get tougher, because the monster had now pulled out a whip capable of conducting electricity. That was the key point in the protagonist's plan. He quickly turned to the pink-haired youth, telling her to guide everyone out as far as possible. She obeyed immediately. Shang took a deep breath, preparing to attack without mercy. With a small talisman in his hand, he wondered why he hadn't used it before. There was no doubt now that he could defeat the boss. The creature didn't seem to trust what he was planning. It lifted its whip, swinging it in all directions, confident it could beat him with just the movement. But with his formation fully ready, Shang launched an attack, electrocuting the beast, which immediately fell to the ground, furious. Shang was a little disappointed that it wasn't defeated yet, so he simply brought his hand closer and unleashed another wave of electricity. Now the boss couldn't get up. The protagonist mocked it for being unable to rise or speak clearly. Without giving it a chance for last words, he delivered the final mercy strike.
In those few seconds, the beast saw its life flash before its eyes, cursing the fact that it had lasted only 5 minutes. Jimin appeared on the protagonist's shoulder, asking if he was finished. Shang explained that he had actually just sent it back to its world.